Okay.
Hey everybody, Monday once again, Mr. Nick Launay, all the way from Spain.
Hello.
How are you, sir?
Yes, I'm very good.
Good.
I couldn't be happier. I'm back in the actual village in Spain where I grew up.
That's fantastic.
My parents moved here when I was 8 years old,
So,
and it
for
was a long, long,
Juliana,
long time ago. Actually, I'm in a town called Nerja, which is
uh,
Nerja, which is a little bit bigger. It's now a town. It was a village, and it's by the seaside. It's got beautiful beaches. Frigiliana was where we first moved to, which is still to this day one of the most stunning Spanish villages you can imagine, and it's about 15 minutes drive up the mountain from here.
right.
And it was very primitive when there was no water or electricity in the houses. There was no road to it. So is it an extraordinary thing that my parents decided to do?
Well, we can
But
we could
great,
just
great for kids.
jump right in with that. But first, before we start, I have to say congratulations for having the number one album in the UK this week with
I
Idols.
know. It's
How
incredible.
First of all, how awesome
Uh,
that you did it, and second of all, how awesome that a
Thank
record
you.
like that can be number one. I mean, it
I
probably
know,
means it
right?
sold like six
It's
copies instead of five, but
Yeah,
I don't care. It's
yeah.
amazing. It's amazing. It's a great record. It sounds super
Thank
cool.
you. Thank you.
Really,
Thank you.
really good.
I mean, there was always a feeling that it might, just because they're so popular and their fans are those type of fans that just, all buy the record when it comes out kind of thing. So, but, it was up against Prince.
Right,
I mean, Prince,
right. The Sign of
right?
the Times reissue stuff,
Yeah.
right?
And
Yeah.
and it's like, that was that was like, I thought, this it won't. And also, I just have to, this was the first album I've ever produced with another producer.
Mm,
It was so we have to give credit to Adam Greenspan, also
yes.
known as Atom. He's one of my best friends, and he's basically was started off being my assistant. God, I mean, I'm talking 16 years ago, and as happens, he's learned how I do things, and because we've worked together so much, um, I mean, he has a different take on things because he's from Atlanta, and he's very sort of punk rock in an American way. I'm sort of more obviously from the English school, and I'm quite a lot older than him. So, but anyway, we both, me and Atom, mixed the last record, the
Right.
Joy record, and that was the thing with that is that I was very busy doing other things. I just did not have time to mix the whole record. So I mixed, some of the like 4 songs, and he mixed the rest, and it came out really, really well. And so, come doing this new album, the band were, asked us both to do it, which was fantastic. And that was really good for me because I again took on way too much work last year. I did 5 albums back to back last year. So,
Right.
and the Idols one was right towards the end. So it was fantastic that Atom and I were doing it together. I have to say, not that it took any less time or any less of my time, because we always worked together anyway. So it was a bit of a sort of thing where ultimately I'm just super happy that he got credited as
Right.
a record producer on it, because he is a killer record producer, and his career is, starting and going up. And I'm trying to work less, which how hard that is. It's not, it
Well,
doesn't come
I'm
easy
I'm
because
actually getting pretty good at it because there's not a lot
yeah,
of work at the moment. But that's all right.
right.
That's all right. But that's awesome. I mean, just to jump into something, I'm curious. Was it hard for you, or did you even see him in a different light than on previous projects because he was officially a producer, or did you just naturally do exactly what you did anyway?
I did. He definitely said, you know, voiced his opinion strongly, whereas before, when he was basically my engineer or, you know, helping me produce, I would say, you know, assistant producer. Obviously, he, you know, I was running the shop, and it's so he would be very, very much listening to what I was trying to do or wanted to do and helping me do that. Whereas this was you know, he had ideas that were fantastic. And I had my ideas, and it's very interesting. I would say, for sake of simplicity, his perspective on idols is how they will work very well in America. He had an American perspective on that band.
Right.
Clearly, because he's American and he came from Atlanta. So, and whereas I was very much channeling my feeling of when I worked with Killing Joke and the Gang of Four, for in particular those two bands, because the idols are very influenced by those two
Right.
bands.
Yeah.
And that's
very.
probably why it's probably why they contacted me in the first place, was because I did those records. So I was even more than ever channeling that feeling I had when I went to see those bands live back in, you know, 78, 79. And why is this? Sorry, my phone.
That's all right.
My phone is telling me that Donald Trump is still alive.
It doesn't need to really tell you that, does it? I mean, because
Well,
that
it
was
does.
the situation.
It just did. He will be leaving the hospital anyway.
Wow.
That's a whole other
Fantastic.
subject. Yeah. So,
well, good to know. You heard it here first.
Yeah, you heard it here first. Yeah, so like, for instance, I'm all about echo delays and chaos and creating a vibe. That's what I'm all about. It's absolutely drives me. The more kind of vibe and excitement I can create. I don't want it. I never want records to sound like they're a live gig, because obviously you can go and see them live for that. But I do want it to have the energy, especially with idols. I want it to have the energy that they have live, and the in a way the aggression, but not in a sort of like heavy metal way,
Right.
more in a sort of anarchistic way. So that's what my mind is doing. His mind was really all about making the kick and snare super punchy and in your face, and, you know, very clear, and which is always been the thing about American records. American records are always very they're well engineered, and they're balanced in a way that works sonically very well. And English ones, sometimes some of the best records from England actually sound like shit, but they have a vibe.
Very
they have
much
a vibe,
so.
right?
Yeah.
And I've always, because I come completely from being an engineer and wanting them to sound good, I'm sort of like, engineering and mixing is almost like second nature to me, and it has been for a long time. But what I'm really trying to do is get the feeling and the vibe. So me and him working together is actually kind of great, because what we did with mixing, it was all a bit experimental and fun. But what we did with mixing is, he took, you know, 6 songs, I took 6 songs, and then we got them to a point and we sent them to each other.
Right.
So then I added all my chaos to his one, and he made my kick and snare a little bit punchier, and, you know, clarity on this, clarity on that, and
right.
I don't know. We're like one. You know, we just get on so well. You know, when you have a best friend that you just can't get enough of. And, you know, considering we probably spent more time in the studio, more time together in the same room than he's married, than he has with his wife, and me with, you know, girlfriends and stuff. It's just like, well, there has to be some some chemistry between us where we just kind of, it's like this, you know,
Yeah,
and
that's brilliant.
it's a wonderful thing when you can find someone like that. And when sometimes I'm juggling 3 or 4 albums at the same time. So he's been absolutely instrumental to me in making it possible for me to actually stay sane while doing these things. I'm flying around, and he'll be working on 2 of them, and you know, he'll start a mix and I'll finish it, or he'll, you know, it's been like that for like seriously 10 years.
Right,
So
brilliant.
now it's like I'm happily delegating to him. And this was the first one that we produced it, like our contracts and everything is 50-50. And I couldn't be happier for him that he's now got a #1 record, you
Yeah.
know.
Oh, it's fantastic.
It's because it'll really help him.
Oh
And
God, yeah.
God, and we really need that, you know, producers. I mean, I was very lucky that I started making records in 1979, you know, and it was the budgets were huge, and you could take a long time if you needed it. It wasn't a problem. It's a different era now. As you know, the budgets are tiny, and you're expected to make the same kind of record,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So yeah, it's yeah. So anyway,
Yeah,
congrats to Idols and Atom
absolutely.
Greenspan
And it's a
and
fantastic
myself.
record. And yourself, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great
And
record.
myself.
It's a really really good record. So look, let's just, we've touched on a few things from early on, but let's start right at the beginning,
Right.
because I want to just, I always love to find out like what was the way in. And so,
Okay.
born in London, you've got a father, French author, among other
Yes.
things, right? Your
Yeah.
mother is a model and an artist and all
Yeah.
sorts of other things. And then you decide, well, they decide to go. I love that
Yeah.
you say that you chose to go with them, even though you were only 6.
I.
But
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
went to go live in the middle of, as you've described, pretty much nowhere in
Yeah.
Franco's Spain. People need to
Yeah.
remember
Franco,
this
Spain. Yeah.
is when, you know, Spain was beautiful, but it was under Franco. It's not exactly the most
Yes.
hospitable place to non-Spaniards and even
Yeah.
some Spaniards. And so, and you lived there for a while. So what was
Yeah.
the impetus for that, and how did that influence you just in terms of the growing up part? Because that's right when you'd start to sort of start making your friends and listening to the radio and things, and all of a sudden you're in Spain, not in London. So
Well, yeah. I mean, I can explain it all. I mean, the obsession with music for me started in England when I was apparently 4 and 5. I used to listen. We had a very big house in the south of England when property was cheap, and it was in a little tiny village called Halse, which is near Taunton.
mm,
You know, it's sort of from London. It's what would it be, southwest, and I apparently used to sit on this large sort of window ledge type thing in the kitchen next to the radio, and I was just transfixed with the music on. Presumably, it was God. What was the pirate radio back then? There was a pirate radio out at sea that played the best music,
right.
and you know, it was the Stones, Beatles, all that. So I liked music from then. I was really, really into it. Then the reason my parents moved from England, so they were both they were very social people. My dad played piano and sang, and they were very elegant, a very, very elegant couple. My mum was in vogue and all this stuff. And she was brought up very posh. But her parents were, she was basically sent to Swiss finishing school,
Wow.
where you put a book on your head and, you know, learn how to, and she wasn't allowed to work. You know, that she was not supposed to work.
Right.
She was supposed
Supposed to
to
get
marry
married.
into,
Yeah.
marry into royalty or a lord or wealthy people, I suppose, but more into aristocracy. It was all that kind of stuff going on because my grandfather was a major in the army, and he was in India, and he was quite a character. Anyway, my dad, on the other hand, was French, and he would go to these. He worked for his dad, delivered caviar and smoked salmon and luxury French type food to the Ritz Hotel and various hotels and parties. So he would go up to these parties and dressed as a French waiter and speaking with a French accent, even though he didn't actually have a French accent, but he spoke French. And you'd put down these silver plates with all this luxury food. And if you liked the party, he would go down to his little van, change into a suit, and go back up,
Right.
to the party. And he'd say, my name is Andre. I've been invited by Jean-Claude. I don't know if he's here. And they'd go, oh, well, I don't know a Jean-Claude, but do come in. And so he'd get invited. He'd basically crash these parties. And of course, he'd meet all these lovely, beautiful women who were bored out of their minds, because they'd all were like my mum. That's how he met her. So anyway, one thing led to another. And they then were out, he was writing, they were out socially. My parents used to tell stories about seeing Marlene Dietrich and, Russ Conway and, just out basically in the cool, probably quite posh clubs around London. It was that world. And they lived in London and they were, both dressed incredibly. I've got incredible photos of them that are just styling. But she really wanted to get away from my grandfather, although he was a lovely chap. And it got to a point where, here's another thing. So me and my brother, I have a brother who's 2 years younger. We were supposed to go to Eton,
right?
Which is like Harvard,
yeah,
right? But only it's got more of a class issue. It's basically all the prime ministers of England went to Eton, pretty much. And then Oxford or Cambridge. We were supposed to go. Like my grandfather had paid for us to go, and it's a boarding school, and we wouldn't have grown up with my parents. It would have been a completely different life. And my mum was just like, no way, this isn't happening. So they escaped England and went to the south of Spain. So we got down there, 68, which is, when flower power, hippiedom, all this is happening. So moved to this little village, which is, as I said, 15 minutes from where I am right now. And they bought a soap factory, which was a ruin, put a roof on it. So it was a big, big house, really cool house, with many bedrooms. And their main friends here in the south of Spain this is way before Spain got touristy. Like there were very few foreigners. But all their friends were painters, poets. A lot of them made music, and most of them were American. And a lot of the guys were guys who escaped America because they didn't want to go to Vietnam.
Right.
So it was this. It was Hemingway used to live here, and this town Nerja is where the Lorca family lived. Lorca is the Shakespeare of Spain. So it's got an incredible history of writers and poets and painters in this particular place. And that's what it was like. It was just my house, the house where I grew up, was just constantly full of eccentric artists. There was always this big piece of canvas nailed to the patio wall, and this guy was throwing paint at it. And his name was Alan Tobias, and he's an extraordinary artist. I mean, absolutely mind-blowingly good. And then there would be all kinds of things going on. Plus, we're near Morocco. So they would go over and get hashish. So everybody was high. The wine, a bottle of wine cost 1 peseta. 1 peseta. I mean, you know, that is like,
cheaper
what
than
is
water.
that? It's like 1/10 of a cent.
Right.
Something like that. And so anyway, everybody was very happy people.
Right.
And I learned how to make tie-dyed T-shirts that were sold on the beach. And, you know, my parents definitely indulged in the spirit of free love. There was my mother had a boyfriend called Motorcycle Michael, who had long hair and purple glasses, and he drove a chopper that he'd shipped over from America. It was one of those, you know, with the long forks.
Easy Rider.
I used to ride on the exactly like Easy Rider without the flag, but it was like a fantastic looking bike. Anyway, it was all that. So needless to say, the music, all these people, like I said, mostly Americans, bought all their LPs over. They were obsessed with music. So all day long, it was like Doors, Stones, you know, Van Morrison, Cream. I mean, I grew up with all that stuff.
Right.
And constantly. But also, you know, I was outdoor. I was, you know, Spain then, no one locked their doors. In fact, no one really closed their doors. You just running in and out. As a little kid, I was running around the tomato fields with my Spanish friends, and it was a very free life and very safe. And I mean, just fantastic. I mean, I absolutely blessed that I had that childhood.
Right.
And I come back here, and I'm still like, it's just a buzz, you know. It's just that, and my Spanish friends are still here.
Oh, amazing.
It is amazing. But basically, the music thing, I knew every tiny little detail of every Rolling Stone record made during the, you know, 60s and 70s. I mean, you know, really, I mean, and Beatles. And so I knew probably most majorly known rock records of the 60s, 70s. I know them inside out.
Right.
Because they were playing all day, and I had headphones that you know, there were a lot of English and, well, a lot of Danish people. They would come down on holiday for a month, stay for 6 months, and then they'd leave. And they knew I was obsessed with music, so they'd leave me their headphones. You know, so I had some really good headphones. I had, you know, my dad gave me his Grundig, because he used to do radio shows. He used to go on the radio and tell funny stories, and he stopped doing that, so he gave me his Grundig. So I had a reel-to-reel. I had a couple of cassette machines that were very new then, so I could dub from one cassette machine to another, and I could make tape loops. And I stuck sticky tape on the erase head of the Grundig so that it wouldn't erase, so I could overdub, you know, stuff like that. And I was just so into it. So then basically, eventually around 76, Franco died. And even though Franco was a dictator and it was, you know, dark and evil,
it was it was stable,
right?
Evil.
It was stable, and you really didn't notice anything. I mean, yes, the people were, or everybody, a bit like in China, you know, everybody, every house had a picture of Franco above the, you know, sometimes above their bed, along with Jesus Christ, because of course it's incredibly Catholic.
Right.
I mean, there is back then it's Catholic and nothing else at all. So, and that was quite funny because me and my brother, we both had really long hair, and all Spanish kids had shaved, almost like military type cut. So we really stood out. So, there was all this. I remember once at school, I get teased. We both get teased a lot. And you look like a girl, you got long hair, blah, 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 all the kind of name calling because we had long hair. And my brother, who, even though he's younger, was a bit tougher than me, he'd go, oh, so are all men, they'd say, oh, mariquita, which means kind of like pufta in English, right? You're a mariquita, which actually means it's a flower. Because you've got long hair. And so my brother would say, oh, does that mean all men that have long hair are mariquita? And they'd go, yeah. And he says, oh, so Jesus Christ is a mariquita then? And they go, oh my God, shocking. And that was it. Never, ever got called that again, ever. So it was that kind of a country. And, it was bizarre, man. I mean, gay people were shot for being gay, literally. So it was a very repressed country in that way. But on the other hand, foreigners could come into Spain and live without any paperwork at all and open businesses. And it's like, didn't matter. But come 76, around about 76, and Franco died around then, and suddenly they got their shit together. And, suddenly there was a king, and the government was, obviously no dictator, but the paperwork had to be right. And my mum didn't have any paperwork to do work. So we literally had to leave the country.
Wow.
So that's why we went back to England. And just in time for, and I basically loved it in London because I had no fear being a teenager. I just went out every night and went to all the punk rock gigs, and I literally saw every punk band you could mention, except for the Sex Pistols.
Yeah.
Right? But I bought a couple of tickets to go see the Sex Pistols, but they cancelled. So, but then I got to hang out with Johnny Rotten.
Well,
anyway,
exactly.
So
exactly. You made up for it.
I made up for it. Yeah.
So you already had this idea of, first of all, just listening to records. So you get an idea of record production. You're doing sound on sound. You're doing tape loops. You're doing dubbing and all that. So when you got back, I mean, it's within 2 years you started working at Tape One, right?
Yeah.
So was that was it? Like, you knew from then you wanted to do something? I mean, how did the Tape One job come about?
That came about. So my dad, even though my parents split up while I was in Spain, they communicated very well. So me and my brother went between the two, which means we stayed in England with my dad, because my dad moved back to England first. But anyway, when we moved back to England, and we basically, for a period there, the whole family were there, even though my parents were different houses. My dad was writing scripts for films at a film studio called Bray Film Studios, which is where pretty much all the Hammer horror movies were done.
Right.
And Star Wars #1 was made there, and Alien was made there. It's basically a small film studio. Pinewood is the big one, and Bray is like a much smaller version. And they do a lot of effects, less acting, more effects. Anyway, so it's a fascinating place. My dad got me a job there as a runner, or gopher, as they're called, when I was 16, 17. And there was a recording studio there. And it belonged to this guy. What's his name? His name was Adam. And you'll never guess what artist he had come in there. Throbbing Gristle.
Wow.
Throbbing Gristle. Yep. I mean, so it's insane. I was basically, running around fetching stuff, and can you deliver this to Studio One? That's, can I have a cup of tea, please? People like Peter Cook and Dudley Moore made a film there, which was a spoof on Sherlock Holmes, and Dudley Moore used to chase me and another kid who was a teenager. We both had the same job. His name was Dermot, and Dudley Moore was in drag. He was supposed to be Sherlock's mother, and he was all in black, and he was just insane. So he was dressed as a black, as like
Like
yeah,
yeah.
you get the idea. So he would chase us. You naughty boys, what you been up to? And he'd chase us with his umbrella. He had an umbrella. He'd say, oh, yeah. And he'd catch up and he says, I just want a cup of tea. Can you make me a cup of tea? So it's a crazy job. But anyway, there was a recording studio there. And I sort of would just hang around because I was fascinated and I could see through the door. And Adam, the owner, basically after a while saw that I was interested. He said, do you want to come in? And I sat in the corner on a throbbing gristle session. Of course, that was, definitely no normal recording session. I thought they were absolutely crazy, which of course they were. But I loved all the machines and the lights and the meters, and it was just, I was in heaven there. And I used to, in England, we say skive. I used to skive off, in there. And so that I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked. I loved equipment, probably more than music or both, but I was fascinated with tape machines and all that. So anyway, after a while, I'm thinking, well, I couldn't get a job there. He had an assistant, and it was a very small. I think he had a Trident or something like that. So it was a decent studio, but it was a small studio. He told me about a job that was going in a nearby in a factory, which was really a small little production place where they were building desks. It was a company called Alice. Alice was owned by a guy. Can I remember his name now? Anyway, this guy was an engineer who built outboard equipment and desks for Joe Meek.
Wow.
So basically, the Joe Meek stuff that you can buy now is made by this guy, and he owned the company Alice, and then he changed the name Alice back to Joe Meek once he got permission to do that. So he's a really lovely guy, and he gave me a job. So I was soldering and building these desks, thinking that if I knew how to make them, surely I would know how to use them. Not the case, unfortunately, because I was literally soldering, diodes and transistors that all were number coded onto these boards, and that's it.
Right.
And everyone, all the other people in the room were these old ladies with, just like Monty Python, with sort of purple and blue rinsed hair. They're going, oh, did you hear about Mrs. So-and-so down the road? It was like that. It was hilarious. So after 6 months of that, I said to the owner, I wish I could remember his name. Oh my God. Because he was lovely, and he absolutely knew what I wanted to do. So this is what happened. I'm working away, soldering, doing this mundane job. And they were listening to a radio station called Capital Radio, which I think might still exist. I don't know.
Yeah,
but they used to, and they used to have ads on it for what jobs for teenagers, to get the youth working. And they said, London Recording Studio is looking for basically an assistant engineer, and if you come to the Capital One offices, we could tell you what number to call. I couldn't believe it. So next morning, I ran to the Capital building and said, they gave me the number. I called the number, spoke to this guy called Bill Foster and a guy called Barry Ainsworth, who owned Tape One. Barry Ainsworth was the guy the engineer who was then an assistant engineer who pushed record on the Trogs tape.
He's the guy.
Yes.
He's one of the best humans ever born.
Right. Anybody who hasn't heard the Trogs tape, go
Oh,
on YouTube, type in Trogs tape.
God, there's some fucking fairy dust on that tape.
I know, right? So if you listen, at one point they say, you know how they have that Somerset accent. They say, "Here, Barry, play that tape again." Well, that's Barry Ainsworth,
Oh, amazing.
right? When he was presumably a teenager. So anyway, he owned half owned. Anyway, lovely people. They said, you know, where are you? Why don't you come in for an interview now? So I literally went from Capital to them, which is just down the street, luckily, did this interview, and obviously didn't go to work that day out in Windsor, which was about an hour out of London. I felt really bad about it, but I thought I did quite well at the interview. But they asked me, have you got any experience with equipment? And I said, yes, I build these desks that are for a company called Alice. And they said, really? We've just had 3 of their desks arrive this morning. Look, there they are. I was like, oh shit. And they said, yeah, the owner, whose name I can't remember again, is a great friend of ours, and he built these special desks. And I said, well, I probably made some of those desks. So they said, so you know how they work? And I said, yes. Which was a lie. I knew how to make them. So anyway, I thought, fuck, this is terrible. They're going to now call my boss and say that I went into an interview instead of being there for work. And they did. But because he was such a nice guy, he recommended me. He said, look, you know, young Nick he works really hard, but he really needs to be in a recording studio making music. It's you know, I promised him that he would learn how to do this. So they gave me the job. So it was a lucky break. It all worked out. And that's how I got the job there. So that was my first in. And then the next thing that happened, which was extraordinary to me, is that basically my job at Tape One was to duplicate tapes very accurately. So I had to know how to line up tape machines. You know, you get 2 1/4-inch machines, and you put the master tape, which, you know, there's only one of on one machine, and you do a copy, and you had to do it at specific lineup. For, like, Europe was IEC and so on, and you know, they wanted it 7.5 IPS, 15. So I learned a lot about tape and lining it up. I mean, a lot, like biasing tape, azimuth, all that boring stuff that's actually very important. I also learned how to edit tape, and I got really good at it. And a song came in, which was a new song, no one had ever heard it, by a band that no one had ever heard, and I liked it a lot. And it was kind of punk, but it wasn't. It was kind of punk disco, and it was very cool, and it sounded a little bit like Iggy Pop talking on it. And so I loved this song. It just came in, and I had to copy it a few times, so I got to know it. And I thought there was an instrumental version, right? There was the main mix with the vocals and an instrumental, and then another one with the backing vocals. And so I basically just copied whatever bits I needed and chopped them together, and then made a loop around. Using 2 tape machines and some microphone stands. It was going round, and and I made things backwards, and I made this alternative version, which was about 5.5 minutes long. And I was there until like 2 a.m, working on this thing for fun. And the mastering engineer, because they had a mastering room at Tape One, that's really what the big business was at that place, called Dennis Blackham, who was quite a famous mastering engineer. And he came in, knock, what are you doing here? And I said, oh, I'm just messing around with this thing. He said, you playing that song he says, it's really good, isn't it? He says, I just listened to it. I'm mastering it tomorrow. And I said, yeah, it's great. And he said, well, what have you done? So he asked me to play so I played it to him. He said, that's great. He said, tell you what, tomorrow the singer's coming in. I'll play it to him. I said, you can't do that. I've butchered his song. I've chopped it all up. I've put it back together. There's backwards bits. It's just, he said, no, it's great. It's great. He said, give me a copy. And this guy was really kind of like my boss, lovely guy, actually. And so I ran off a copy for him. Next day I came in, I kind of forgot that had happened. Knock, knock, knock. Dennis goes, hey, Nick, are you busy at the moment? I said, no, that's all right. And he says, oh, well, this is Robin Scott, who's the singer from this band. So the song was pop music, pop music, radio, video, that one.
Yeah.
What was it? London, New York, London, Paris, Munich. Everybody talk about
Pop music.
Pop music. That's it. That's it. So, and he was, he looked like Brian Ferry. He had a suit, just like he does in the video. Good looking dude, nice shoes, crocodile shoes. I mean, he was, and he just said, Dennis has just played me this version that you've done, and it's really good. I really, really like it. And I said, oh, great. I thought you might,
might be angry.
lose it. And he said, it's very interesting because we haven't put the song out yet, but I've just been in New York with my friend Malcolm McLaren. And in New York, Robin Scott managed the Slits for a short period when he lived in Paris, when the Slits were in Paris. And so him and Malcolm McLaren were kind of friends and also competitors, let's say. But anyway, he said in New York, in the dance clubs, they're doing this thing where they're mastering singles onto 12-inch vinyl. So they get more low end, but they're not releasing them. It's just for DJs. And he said, I want to put out a longer version of the song as a 12-inch single. And it's going to be the first commercial 12-inch single ever in England and possibly America. He said, I'm not sure if anybody's actually put out a commercial one yet, but he said, I've got a gut feeling this 12-inch single thing is going to take off. And I need a longer version. And you've done it. And would you be okay if I used your version? I'm like, I think I was 18? I suppose I was 18 by this point.
God.
I'm like, so incredible. So anyway, it got mastered as it came out on a pink vinyl, and it had my version on one side, and on the other side it had the normal version and the B side with a double groove.
Oh, right. Concentric grooves.
That Dennis perfected. So depending on when you put the needle down, you get one song or the other, which is kind of gimmicky and great.
Did he cut
Did
he cut the Monty Python record with a double groove?
Yes, I believe he did.
Oh God, matching tie and handkerchief. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, sorry.
Dennis Blackham. So he was also known as Bilbo Baggins. And he used to, how mastering engineers would sign in the middle of the group, in the middle, Bilbo.
Lead out, yeah.
So if you look at a lot of records from back then, in the 80s, 70s, and end of 70s, early 80s, you'll see Bilbo, and that's him, that's Dennis Blackham. So anyway, long story short, the single comes out and goes to number one. I mean, it went to number one in America, England, Australia, Germany. And shortly after it being at number one for about 2 weeks, they put the 12-inch out, and it kept the sales up there. So I think it was, that song was in the English chart top 5 for like 7 weeks, which was extraordinary because of the help. So anyway, my name's on it, and it's called the Nix Mix, NIXMIX, and he credited me as Nick Nick Launay, but N-I-K, because the music was spelled M-I-M-U, with a K on him. Anyway, that ended up being the key to me getting a job at the Townhouse, because when I went to the Townhouse for an interview to work in a proper recording studio, because Take One didn't record bands. Mick Glossop, who was the chief engineer, and Mick Glossop is a great recording engineer, producer. He did a lot of Van Morrison records, and he did the Skids. He did a lot of punk records. Great guy, very strict man. He was very, very strict, like a school teacher when I worked there. But anyway, I did this interview with him. Probably by that point, maybe I was 19, something like that. And again, what experience have you had? And I said, well, I did this record, blah, 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 12-inch pop music. And I showed it to him, and he was like, wow, that's incredible. He said, so have you recorded anything? And I said, no, that's why I want to come here. I was very honest. I said, I really want to record bands. I love bands and I want to record it. But I've done this. I know all about lining up tape machines. I know everything about editing. And so he was great. He saw that I was passionate. And so I got a job as an assistant. And then things really started happening. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's because that is, for the people who watched the Steve Lillywhite interviews, that's exactly the time when they're doing Peter Gabriel's record. Right. There's a lot going on there. So Hugh Padgham is staff engineer or just works there a lot?
Staff engineer.
Staff engineer. Yeah. So Lillywhite was in as a producer, John Leckie, Tony Visconti.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, is this where you first worked with Nigel? Because I've seen in a couple of places that you worked with him long ago, Nigel Godrich, but I could never figure out where it was.
That was at RAC.
Okay.
So I worked.
So we'll come to that.
Yeah, that was a bit later. That was once I started being hired as a record producer and was choosing different studios, and he was an assistant at RAC at the time.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, so let's stay at Townhouse for a second, though, because you're not getting out of there without talking about Kate Bush for a really long time. But let's get ourselves up to Kate Bush, because, I mean, you were assisting on some amazing sessions. I mean, the story of the Phil Collins session, I love that. And if people could find you telling it elsewhere, but if you want to tell that one and just some of the stuff that was going on, that would be great.
Well, I mean, yeah, what happened was it all happened very quickly. Very, very quickly. Like you said, when I started there, almost like day one, which at the Townhouse, but I was making tea. I wasn't an assistant engineer or tape op, as they called them back then, because you were operating the tape machines. So you were tape op. I wasn't a tape op. I was a tea boy. I was making tea. So I made a couple of cups of tea for the Peter Gabriel session, because it was just finishing. I mean, literally they'd finished mixing.
Right.
But I heard that record on the big speakers. There was a playback party, actually. But it wasn't really a party. There weren't that many people there. But it was a playback on the speakers. I listened to that record and I was just absolutely blown away by it and the drum sound. Even though I was more into punk, and this was very bizarre, sophisticated. I mean, if you look at the musicians on that third Peter Gabriel, I mean, I love a lot of Peter Gabriel stuff, but I also kind of don't like. I'm not a Genesis fan. There's a couple of songs, but to me that's real. I'm not into prog rock. When it gets into that area of musos going showing off to each other, I'm not into it. I'm really not. I just don't like it. Because I can feel it. I can feel that they're showing off. And to me, that's, I don't know, that's a different thing to me. So anyway, that Peter Gabriel album to me is not like that. It's just an incredible, and I think a lot of it's down to Steve Lillywhite, because he is well, I watched him and how he communicated with the bands, and saw that he made it a lot of fun, and it was all about feeling and mood and attitude, and it really, really, you know, he had a huge impression on me, and I already loved the records he'd made. I mean, I'm this huge Susie and the Banshees fan, and so on, and the XTC's
Black Sea. Yeah.
yeah, well, drums and
Oh,
wires, I
right.
thought
Yeah.
was an
Before.
incredible sounding record.
Yeah.
So anyway, one thing led to another, whereby uh, I got put on the session for Black Sea, the XTC record, and it was just incredible, because I got on really well with Hugh, and I got on really well with Steve, and it just became a bit of a team there, just for a short period. And there were a couple of other records that they made and I assisted on, and I just became really good friends with Hugh. I mean, I was really I was so into it and so passionate, and I think Hugh, I kept asking Hugh questions, and he would always take the time to answer them. There was another engineer, also in house, who wasn't like that. He was, you have to shut up, stay at the back, don't ask questions, you're interrupting the session, kind of thing. So he had a different attitude, which was fine. I mean, that's probably more the thing, right? But Hugh really was great to me. And so God, I'm trying to think what happened first. Well, what happened? Yeah, what happened was I learned. I picked up things very quickly from the way Hugh engineered and got drum sounds. And of course, one of the things that happened was that Phil Collins played drums on the Peter Gabriel record, and in particular on this song called Intruder,
Yeah.
which everybody should go and listen to after we've done this, because it is mind-blowing. That drum sound is just, there's no cymbals or hi-hat. It's just like it just goes,
Yeah.
and it's such a groove. It's so simple, but Phil Collins is a phenomenal drummer. I mean, he is killer
Yeah.
drummer. Then you've got the drum room, which was all stone, so he's a great drummer. And you got Hugh getting those sounds, and Steve saying, make it more distorted, not less, and all that. So this combination of everything that happened that created this drum riff and sound, that to me is one of the most influential things that ever happened to me, as far as listening to something and going, I want that.
Right.
So a few months later, after the Black Sea record, Hugh was asked by Phil to produce the first Phil Collins solo record, which was Face Values, and I was assistant. And so the thing with that record is Phil had done a lot of demos at his home, and they, on not all the songs, but maybe half the songs on that record, they transferred the demos onto tape and then other things were overdubbed. Like, they got some great bass players came in. I mean, that was incredible. What's his name? Lee Sklar. What's his name?
Yeah. Lee Sklar. Yeah.
Yeah, he came down, and there was just mind-blowing musicians came down to an Earth, Wind and Fire and put on the horns. And anyway, so In the Air Tonight was basically just a drum machine and a guide vocal, and it just went, that drum machine, and it's got a vibe. And then there's the keyboard, which is just some Roland thing with a slap back on it. Very simple song, right?
Yeah.
And so Phil said, can you get me that sound that you got on the Gabriel records, on Intruder? So he played the Intruder part, got that sound. Hugh got it very quickly, because it's not that, it's not that complicated. It's all to do with the room and the compression on the SSL desk. Same mic, same everything. And Phil goes out and says, play the song from the top. And it's probably going on to 9 tracks on the multi-track, push record at the beginning of the song. And Hugh's there waiting for something to happen. And I'm at the back on the high chair stool thing because of the tape machine being tall. And Hugh looks at me and goes, is there anything on the meters? And I'm like, no, because we could see Phil was out there and he was doing this thing like, and he's left-handed, or at least his drum kit is left-handed. So it's all back to front and the toms were kind of in the way. So we couldn't see quite, it wasn't clear for us to see if he was actually playing or not. So and then Hugh soloed it and there was just this breathing and like little taps here and there, and so I think Hugh thought, maybe he's just gonna play brushes on it or something. So turns things up more. It's already got that.
Yeah.
Anyway, then we're listening, and then after a while, we're about halfway through the song, and he says, I guess he's just going to come in at some point. I'm just waiting. And then suddenly it's like, and I fell off my chair. Hugh was like, fuck, and run, turn the volume down, and it was like, that drum part, great drum part. And it's just like, oh my God, so good, so good. And I was like, well, okay, I now have a different opinion about this record. I mean, actually the songs I thought were great, but my mind was very punk rock, and I was like, oh my God, this song. So we get to the end of it, and Hugh's like grinning, and I'm like, and he said, Phil, you got to come in and have a listen, man. You got to come in and have a listen. It sounded incredible. He said, no, I want to do another take. And he's like, no, I really think you should come in and have a listen. So no, I want to do another take. Run it again. And it's just like, and then he looked at me and he said, I guess push. And I was like, do I push record? I mean, because there was no other tracks, because that was the thing. It's like, there's no more tracks. So you have to erase what you just done. Oh my God, it was the most nerve-wracking time, because even though nothing was said, it was blatantly obvious to me that Hugh's like, could we run that off to a cassette
safety,
or something,
just
so we
anything.
could play it back in case he does something, because we didn't know if he was going to do something different. But it's Phil Collins' album, and he's the boss. Anyway, sure enough, he did exactly the same.
But so did you have to start at the top again? So you had to wait to see what he was. Okay, good.
No, we went.
All right.
We went close. We went.
So it
closer,
wasn't 3 minutes of suspense, wondering what the hell was
going
to happen.
But it was nerve-wracking, because we thought, what if he doesn't do that drum fill? Because it was. I mean, obviously now, that drum fill is probably one of the most famous drum fills. Well,
exactly, but you'd only heard it once ever. So
we'd only heard it once, and we were impressed on one listen. And but thankfully, Phil, being Phil, and he knows what works, did exactly the same drum fill. I mean, probably identically. I mean, it didn't sound any different. All he did was change the kick drum part after it.
Right.
So the groove part was different. I mean, we could have kept the drum fill and dropped in after it, but the discussion just. He was impatient, wanted. So anyway, that's the thing. But it was just, and then credit to the A&R guy at Virgin, because Phil signed to Virgin, which was a bit of a, it was an unusual record company because it was independent for such a big artist, singer of Genesis, who were a massive band. But the A&R guy, he chose that as the first single. I mean, Phil didn't even think it was a single, because it has nothing about it that's single like. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sure enough, it came out and went to #1 in England, and probably one of the most famous songs
Yeah.
of all
Oh, I'm
time.
sure it went to #1 in the States too. It must have.
Yeah, I think
I
so.
mean, it was
Although
everywhere.
for the American version, this is classic A&R stuff. We had to overdub drums from the beginning. There is a single version that came out in
Wow.
America, and it has a backbeat
Oh, I don't
because
remember that at all. I only
the
remember
Amer
the drum machine version. Wow.
well, they were clearly wrong that it in saying that it was necessary, but they said, man, we got to have a backbeat. We can't play it on American radio. Won't play it, and it's got a backbeat, backbeat, backbeat. And it was like, what's a fucking backbeat? I've never heard of a backbeat. Oh, you mean the snare drum on 2 and 4? Okay, so he played this tom part,
Wow.
and it's out there. It's definitely out. It was the American single, and of course it then shot up the charts. And I think they then kind of switched it over to the album version, and
Right.
we never hear the other version now. And it
No.
was edited down. I actually did the edit on it. I had to chop that song down because it had to be. Oh, this is funny actually. It had to be basically for a single. It had to be like 3 minutes something, 3 minutes 40, 3 minutes 50. So edited it because it's actually close to 5 minutes long, that song, I think. I edited it with that A&R guy, and what's his name? I'm terrible with names. I guess it's 40 years ago. So I edited this thing with the A&R guy who came down, and then it was sent to Phil and Hugh for approval. But we couldn't get it down enough without losing precious bits. So this is another one that you could look out for on the single. It's listed as 370.
Nice.
It's 4 minutes,
10. That's
4 minutes
great.
10. Yeah. So it had that, and it had this backbeat on it. So there's a version out there of singles of that song with
Oh,
a
that's
different drum
fantastic.
part
Because
at the
then the
beginning,
DJs would look at
and
it,
it
they'd see a
yeah.
3,
So
and like, yeah, okay,
yeah,
fine.
and they go yeah, I'll play it. I thought that was genius.
God, that is
370.
awesome. That is
Yeah.
awesome. All right. So
All
obviously
right.
we're going to get you to PIL because that was before Kate, right?
Yes,
Okay.
just.
All right. So
Just.
we'll go there first, right?
Okay. So that was very shortly after that Phil Collins record. I was put on as an assistant on a Public Image session because Public Image was signed to Virgin, and they used to give cheaper studio time to Virgin artists, mostly on the weekend. So it was a weekend, and um, no one wanted to assist on that session. I was still the newest and youngest assistant there, and it was thanks to Hugh, who liked me and got me on the session. Otherwise, I would have been making tea for a lot longer. And so anyway, none of the other assistants, I think there were 3 other guys, wanted to work with Johnny Rotten, because he'd been obnoxious to them, like verbally abusive to them. There's even rumors of him, pissing on the desk, I mean, I find it a bit hard to believe. I've never encountered him doing anything physically to it. He's verbal, sure, but he's
Yeah.
hilarious. I mean, it just depends how you take it, But anyway, so I got put on that session as an assistant, and they were mixing a song that was an outtake from the previous album, which was Metal Box. So it was a reggae-ish, dub reggae type song, with Jar Wobble on bass, and it was a song that they didn't finish. So I think they'd done some vocals or something, and it was mixed time, and a sort of a Jamaican dub engineer who wasn't Jamaican, as far as I can remember. I mean, he was a white guy with dreadlocks, and I don't know who he was actually, but he he like a lot of, reggae or dub type. They are great when they're working on their own desks.
Yeah.
They know where all the knobs
And
are, and they
usually
do
something
great
really
things.
simple, couple of effects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure if you took Lee Scratch Perry and put him on an SSL, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
But on his little whatever it is,
Yeah,
Fostex,
exactly.
he's the king. So this guy was really struggling with the SSL because it was a prototype. This is before SSL got big. There was literally 2 SSLs, period, in the world. One was at the Townhouse, and it was called an SSL B series, and it was very odd. And one of the odd things it had was the to switch the the echo sends on. You pulled the knob up, which is now it's how it's been, and people got used to it, but no other desks didn't do that. So he basically, every time he wanted to put echo on something, it didn't work because he hadn't pulled it up. So I would go over, to the desk every time. He would turn around and say, "Hey man, this one doesn't work," and I'd go up and he'd pull it up, and I'd go, "Okay," and they kept happening. I don't know, maybe he was stoned or something, but he really wasn't learning quickly. And this went on for a while, and after a while John said, "Oh, what's your name?" And I said, "It's Nick." And he said, "Well, Nick, get your fucking chair and put it up near the desk because you're going backwards and forwards like a fucking yo-yo and you're making me dizzy." So I take my high chair, sat next to the engineer, and every time he couldn't get something well, I'd lean over.
Right.
So at one point, right, and so things started happening, got a bit better. And then the engineer got up and left the room to go and have a piss. And John got up for the first time that day and locked the door, locked the engineer out, and looked at me, and he goes, "Right, let's make some fucking music then." And I looked at him, I'm like, "What?" And he said, "Go on." He says, "You know what you're doing. Have a go." So I sat in the other chair and I started doing things. I was like, he said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "I don't want to mess up what the engineer's done." And he goes, "You ain't fucking done nothing," So basically, after a while, the engineer came back and knocking on the door, "Let me in," and it was ignored. Then he phoned, and I picked up the phone, said, "Hello," and he goes, "Hey man, I'm locked out. Can you open the door?" And he goes, and John goes, "Is that him?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Give us the phone." And John goes, "Hello, can I help you?" Guy goes, "Man, yeah, the door's locked. Can you let me in?" And he goes, "Yeah, well, we're making music in here, which is more than you fucking know how to do. So fuck off home." Clonk. And that was it. So I then, started.
Is this when you turned to him and said, "Why'd you cancel all those shows?" And "I didn't want my money back"?
Oh,
And
I know. I should have. Yeah, I didn't do that. But really, what happened, right? I had by this point, I had lots of ideas about this song. I mean, and I loved metal box, so I thought, well, it just needs some echoes in here. And I started doing that, and he liked it. But then he kind of got bored with being in the studio, and he just said, because he saw, you see, that I knew how to work out triplets. You count to 11 on a stopwatch. You push the stop button on 11, and the number that comes up is your milliseconds, and then you multiply by 4 and divide by 3, or is it back to front? I can't remember. Anyway, I knew back then. So I could work out a ding 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 ding, all that stuff. So I knew how to do that. And he that's what he wanted. And it was just worked, you see. So he said, what type of music do you like? What do you listen to? And I said, well, I really like dub reggae. And I had assisted a few weeks before with Steel Pulse. And so that was funny. And anyway, but I said, I really like glam rock. And I went to Portobello Market and I bought all the songs, all these records that I had when I was 12. And he goes, "Oh, what are they?" And it was, Ballroom Blitz and
Right.
Bud, Tiger Feet, Slade, you know, all that stuff, Alvin Stardust, all those glam rock, you know, and T-Rex. So anyway, and Gary Glitter, that was the one. So I showed him, and he goes, "Oh, put that on," and we put on Gary Glitter, you know, rock and roll part one, you know, yeah, that one. And so put that on, and I'd never heard it on big speakers, and it was just
It's a
fantastic.
crazy sounding record.
It really is. And it was like, we were listening to it, and it's like, and I started putting echoes on it and playing around with the effects, and he loved it, and he was dancing around the room, you know, and this was 1980, end of 1980. So he was like wearing the tartan with his orange hair. He was still Johnny Rotten, you know.
Yeah.
And it was just so much fun, and we stayed up all night just playing around with these records. And so the next thing that happened is he went home, I went to sleep on the couch. I got woken up by one of the other assistants, and they said, "Yeah, you're wanted by management. You've got to go up to the office." And I thought, shit, I'm going to go up, and, you know, maybe the engineer has complained that he got kicked out of the studio and whatever. I go up, and the manager said, "We just got a call from Virgin, and John apparently wants you to work next weekend and finish the song." You know, it was probably like 3 p.m. by this point. I'd slept. And they said, "But the problem we have is that, do you know how to mix a record?" And I said, "Yes," which was a lie, because I hadn't really ever mixed a record. And they said, "Well, okay, we'll put you on the session, but you can't have an assistant because you're the newest assistant and the other assistants won't assist you." Anyway, got put on the session. It worked. And they asked me to do the album. So we then did Flowers of Romance.
And that's as a co-producer,
that's
right?
It. Yeah, well, not technically, I wasn't asked to be a producer or anything. I was an in-house assistant engineer.
Right. Okay. So they're going to make the record there, and you're going to work on it.
And so officially, I hadn't even been made an engineer, but
Wow.
I was engineering it. And they did find an assistant. They got a new kid who ended up assisting me, which was nice. And basically, what happened is the record got finished, and all the mixes on that record, by the way, are rough mixes. It never went to mix. Basically, we did them, and I mixed them at the end of the day as a rough mix, and then suddenly it was done, and it got mastered, and that came out. And thank God that happened, because I love that record. I wouldn't change a thing on it.
But you would have.
Well, I would have, given a chance. I probably would. I don't know what I would have done, but I mean, it was just, I didn't know what I was doing. And so by virtue of not knowing what I was doing, it was correct. Do you know what I mean? Because I was doing it as a fan.
Yeah.
And I was a huge Public Image fan, and I was sort of tapped into them, you know, both him and Keith Levine and Martin Atkins, who's a killer drummer, you know. Anyway, the album came out, and they put the song Flowers of Romance out as a single, and much to everybody's surprise, it went top 10. They were on top of the pops. And so it was not, you know, it was a pretty successful record, considering there was no demos, no songwriting. It was just literally written on the spot. I mean, he wrote the lyrics on the back of a cigarette packet, you know, and went out and sang them one take.
Done.
Done. It's incredible. And so what happened was the record so I became really close with Keith, and Keith Levine at the time, he wasn't very well. He was struggling with heroin and all that. And I didn't know. I was just too young and naive to know what he was doing. But he kept disappearing and changing moods. But we got on really well. I just got on well with all three of them. You know, it was just Martin Atkins, Keith Levine, and John. And Keith said to me, "We're not a band, we're a collective. And you're part of the collective. So you're part of Public Image. I was like,
Best day ever.
great. Yeah. And then he said, we're not going to tour it, but we are going to play the songs live. And he said, you should do the sound, because the sounds were so weird. I was just doing my best to get, the, that drum sound, which you can hear it. I mean, if you listen to the song Four Enclosed Walls, it is that drum sound. I mean, it's actually in a way duller and not quite as good as Hugh did, but it actually kind of works. And Martin Atkins' drumming is phenomenal. But anyway, so Keith was really into the idea that I joined the band and I'd make all these echoes and sounds, which I thought was great. I don't know if he mentioned that to John, but I got on really, really well with John. I mean, John is still one of my closest friends. I live in LA and he lives in LA, and I see him now and then, and we just get on really well. There's no bullshit. He's quite a normal guy when I'm with him. He changes a little bit when other people are around. But anyway, so the album gets made and pressed and comes out. And I'm not really expecting a credit. All I've done is, I've done a lot because there was no producer and there's a lot of delays on claps. And I did a lot of editing and I went crazy with that record. So Keith had said to me, which is very sweet of him, he said, I'm going to make sure you get a credit on the record. We don't credit people on the records. And I think if you look at the previous records, there are no credits.
Yeah.
But he said, I'm going to put... So the album comes, it gets delivered, a very, very quick turnaround. I get a copy and I'm looking and my name's not on it. And I thought, as an engineer, is what I thought back. And so I rang Keith up and I said, I'm not complaining at all, but I just thought I'd tell you, that there's no credit on there. And he said, what? I told Virgin to put a credit on there. He rings Virgin up, gives them hell, and they reprint the cover with my name on it in tiny little Gothic writing on the back. So it's only on some albums, because then when it went to America, I guess they got the first draft, which didn't. But anyway, I'm on there. And it says something really nice. It's not. I think maybe it is engineered, but anyway, my name is there, right? And I was so thrilled by this. That happened. Then John did lots of interviews, and in the NME he was asked who produced it because the sounds were so weird, and he said, "Oh, it's this young kid called Nick Launay," and they printed it. And so then, you know how it happens with these things? One magazine prints it and the other, that's new information. And suddenly I got press. And he said, I produced it, produced it. The word, it's there. And so suddenly the Gang of Four ring me up because they like the sound. And then Killing Joke found me and the Slits. And that's how it all happened.
And you're 20,
it was just
21, right?
21, yeah.
And the birthday party
crazy.
at the same time, right?
Absolutely. That happened very shortly after Flowers of Romance came out, because the birthday party, I think it was their first time in England, and they only had a few gigs, and they were not known. No one knew them at that point, but they were signed to 4AD, and the A&R guy was a guy called Ivo.
Yeah.
Ivo Watts Russell. Yeah. And his brother is Perry Watts Russell. Perry Watts Russell ended up being a big A&R guy at Capitol in America. And but Ivo, super cool guy, owned 4AD. And so he heard Flowers of Romance. He somehow knew that it was at the Townhouse, and he found me, called me at the Townhouse and said, really like you to bear in mind, officially I'm still an assistant
Right.
engineer.
And still second from the bottom, right?
Yeah, earning £28 a week.
Ooh, big money.
Big money, £28 a week, and not complaining at all about that. And yeah, so he says there's this band they call the Birthday Party, and he sent me a cassette of a live recording of Release the Bats, and I loved it. I mean, I just thought it was an amazing song. Of course, it was very, very raw and rough live, and hard to hear what the notes of the instruments were. It was just this chaotic noise, but it was a great chaotic noise. And so, in my absolute innocence and naivety, dubbed the cassette onto a 1/4 inch and rearranged the song by editing. Okay, I haven't met the band, haven't even spoken to them, but the studio time is being booked for like the next week. And Ivo had a budget, and it wasn't, I insisted on doing it at the Townhouse because I didn't know any other studio.
Right.
So I was not going to go to another studio. And so it was too much. It was too expensive. Townhouse was like, well, Phil Collins, Thin Lizzy, all these big bands with big budgets were working there. So I asked the manager if there's any way I could work on a day that was not being used and bring the budget down. And they go, nah, the only way we could do that is if you start at midnight. And I thought, okay, start at midnight. But I didn't know the band, but I said to Ivo, ask the band if it's okay, we start at midnight and we'll work through the night. Well, come the night.
Turns out
they said yes. I've set up microphones. They're arriving. Their drums have arrived. I've sort of set them up, and I get this call on the phone, and they go, "Here, Nick, can you come up to reception? It's one of your bands, and they're scaring people. Can you come up and get them?" So I go up there. And sure enough, there they are, and they're all in suits, black suits with white shirts, and the hair is, like The Cure. I suppose they were probably trying to look a bit like The Cure, because The Cure had already made a couple of records, and they looked incredible. I mean, they looked like vampires. They were very pale. And they had this strange accent, which was Australian, which I hadn't really experienced before. And they were like, "Are you Nick?" And I go, yeah, I'm Nick. And of course, I looked, God knows what they thought of me, because I looked very geeky. I looked kind of rockabilly punk.
Right.
But I wasn't wearing black, But anyway, they came down and we recorded 2 songs. We recorded Release the Bats and Blast Off, which is the B-side, which is a great song as well. That night, slept during the day, came back the next time, midnight, and mixed the 2. Done. That was it.
And for people who don't know, this is Nick Cave is the lead singer in this
yes.
band. And if you haven't listened to any, right after
Birthday
Intruder,
Party.
go listen to that. So anyway,
yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, I mean, Release the Bats is probably the most well-known song by. I didn't do it. It was put on an album called Junkyard, which is a great record, and that was produced by an Australian producer called Tony Cohen, who is extraordinary. I mean, that guy, he actually produced a lot of the Nick Cave early record, Nick Cave and Bad Seeds early records. He did an incredible song by Hunters and Collectors.
Oh yeah,
called "Looking for a Stranger." So I think that's what it's called. One of my favorite songs. He is phenomenal. That guy he's no longer with us, but incredible engineer, incredible record producer. So my two songs are on Junkyard. But the interesting thing about Release the Bats is, you know, maybe it is something that's always in me. But when I moved to America, in round about 98. Well, no, I moved there 2001 actually. I started going out a lot to clubs, and of course the clubs I like are the ones that play Gothic music, goth clubs, or that kind of club. And there's this genre of music that they play. They usually have two rooms. They have one room that plays industrial goth music, like Nine Inch Nails, and then they have old school goth music, which is also known as dark wave, because it's new wave but darker.
Right.
I didn't know this, but the records that I made are all dark wave, right? So, Release the Bats is probably the most, not famous, but like played song of dark wave. And there are goth nightclubs all over the world called Release the Bats. There's one in California, there's one in Mexico City. I think there was one in Sydney for a while. I mean, so it's just bizarre to me, this whole thing, this song that was really made in like 6 hours,
Yeah.
6 hours done.
And did they do your new arrangement? Like, how were they?
Oh,
open
yeah,
to that?
yeah. Yes. I mean, it's extraordinary, but I guess it has to do with facial expressions and delivery of when you're explaining something. But I obviously came over to them as so blatantly naive and innocent that they didn't argue. I mean, obviously I've done a lot of records with Nick Cave, and trust me, you suggest something and you better be fucking right, because he'll go, why? You say, hey Nick, have you thought about maybe we could shorten the intro a bit to this song? Why? It's like, why don't you like it? But it's like that. This wasn't. They came down. I'd never met them. I said, I've already set things up, which could have been like, how dare you set our equipment up? Could have been, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't. It was like, okay. And I said, oh, I listened to the song. I've rearranged it. And this is how it goes. Play. And I mean, I don't know if I'd be bold enough to do that now with all the history. So play it to them, and they listened to it. And Mick Harvey, who, they were all very, very bossy people. They had an arrogance to them, which is, of course, is why their music is so incredible in that way. But there was a little bit of a talk, sort of like that. And I suppose they really liked the Flowers of Romance, and were probably quite shocked at how young I was,
right?
And how young my vibe was very young. I mean, I probably looked more like 16 or something, and they listened to the order, and I don't think I think it's possible that they didn't actually remember the arrangement that they had played it in
right
that night.
Right.
I haven't actually asked. I should ask Mick Harvey. I'm still very, very much in touch with everyone. But basically, Mick said, oh yeah, that sounds good. And they played it like that. It was, but it wasn't a case of that they didn't really care. They did care because they were meticulous about the guitar sounds. Like, I had some of the guitar sound. They wanted the guitar sounds to sound like stinging bees.
Yeah, really, they're brittle and yeah.
And so they to get that sound, we put the guitars through 3 equalizers with all the low end and top end notched out, and it was just like 3K. Okay, more 3K, more 3K, just like, it's like this, and it works, and that was their idea. you know, to put it through so many equalizers. And I thought they were nuts, but it worked. And so, you know, it was very much a collaboration of everything, and it works, you know. And I remember them being at each other, you know, in a sort of argumentative way, which is quite a normal Australian thing, to take the piss out of each other, basically. That's what they were doing. And you know, and Tracy Pugh, who was the bass player, he was just guzzling down the beer. And I don't know if at that time they were on doing heroin, or that came a little bit later. I'm still not clear about that, but they were pretty odd, you know. They were very dark. It was a dark vibe, but they were fantastic, you know.
Yeah.
And I really didn't spend that long with them. You know, it was literally, it was work, 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 and then I never didn't see them again. So,
Right.
but the song came out and did well, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. Yeah, you got to listen. Everyone has to listen, no matter what. All right. So
Listen.
look,
Yes, yes.
I want to be
We're
aware
already
of.
2 hours in,
I know.
and we
Well,
haven't even talked about Kate Bush.
I know. Well, we're only an hour and a half since we went live, to be fair. But yes, I know
Oh,
we haven't
okay.
even
All
gotten
right.
you out of, like, you're old enough to drink in the States now. You know, that's it. So,
Yeah,
but
barely.
okay, we have to talk about Kate Bush, and then I suppose we should get you out of the townhouse and
Yes,
onto other things. But we have to talk about it.
yes. Okay, well, so what happened was, um, it was very simple. Hugh Padgham uh, started the, that album, which ended up being called The Dreaming, with her. He was engineering it, and she was producing. It was the first album that she produced, and she was paying for it, as far as I know. I mean, maybe EMI were, but it was very much, there was no record company. It was just her, and she was really young. I mean, she was probably 22,
Right.
right? And amazing. I mean, just what an amazing person. I mean, she's stunning looking, but has her ideas and her dreaminess. You know, she is kind of like a fairy. She's almost supernatural. You know, her eyes. You know, it's all this. When she talks, it's like, and she's got that voice. You know, when she talks, she has a voice. You know, and it's all like, you know, Nick, can we do? You know, it's very. I don't want to impersonate it, but it's like this high voice, and it's, oh, Nick, can we do this? Can we make the drums sound like cannons? And could they be way in the distance? And you know, and then can this come in from? You know, it's just like, it's not like, it wasn't like making an album. It was like making a film, or
Right.
a fantasy film with all these characters. And then she would do all these voices, you know, like low voices and backing vocals, and it was extraordinary to work with her. But the reason I got to do it, that album, was because Hugh started it, and it was taking a long time because she wasn't in a rush. She was a huge artist, had sold probably millions of records
Yeah.
by that point. Is it her fourth album?
I think so. Yeah.
Third?
Kick Inside,
I mean,
Lionheart. I think there was one more before The Dreaming. I should know this.
yeah,
Being the
yeah.
Anyway, it was
I
either
mean,
third or fourth.
yeah. And so there's this feeling of, this could go, this album is no limits. And Hugh was on a kind of time schedule because he had become a very popular big record producer because of the Phil Collins record.
Yeah.
And the next album he was due to do, which was very secretive at the time, was The Police. I guess it was Synchronicity. And so, and that was in producing. He was producing The Police, whereas he was engineering Kate Bush, and he was probably just in-house.
Right.
So he was just getting, I guess, flustered, or he really wanted to work with Kate. He'd worked with her before, obviously, on the Peter Gabriel album, because she came in, and that's where she met Hugh, and why she asked for Hugh was because of that drum sound, and because she sang Games Without Frontiers on Peter Gabriel. So basically, Hugh at this point had heard the Public Image record, had seen that I was working with all these bands, and I was doing good stuff, and he was very happy for me that. So he suggested to Kate that I take over engineering the Dreaming from him. And I believe that's right. He asked me to send him a copy of the Public Image record, which he then sent to Kate, and she liked it, which I get. I get that she would like that, and so that was it. She arrived with her. Some of her family played on it, and her boyfriend called
Del Palmer.
Del Palmer played bass on it. He was there most of the time. They were boyfriend, girlfriend at the time. And and there was a drummer. Now, what was his name? He had a great name. It's on the tip of my tongue. Very unusual name. He was a great drummer, though. Always great at playing toms. All his parts were tom parts. It'll come to me. But he was lovely. I worked on that record for at least 3 months.
Wow.
And they were long, long days. She would bring in two chocolate bars, 2 Cadbury's Dairy Milk, those big purple chocolate bars. Yeah. And they were always at the end of the desk. And she also had some hashish, which I had experienced before. So even though I've never smoked a cigarette in my life, not very good with smoke, but it was in the air. We were all like, woohoo! So the imagination was definitely going wild, and it was great. I mean, I couldn't believe it. She was amazing, and she is amazing.
I need to just ask a question because I'm such a geek about her. Was it a ton of experimentation, or did she have it in her head and it was going towards what was in her head the whole time?
It was in her head. It was mostly in her head, and she had very strong ideas and imagery about what it should be, and she would explain it to God. I wish I could remember the name of the drummer, because he was very important. I could go grab the CD
and look if you want.
Because basically she would sing and play piano, and I'd record the piano live and her singing live.
Right.
And then Del Palmer would play bass, and this guy would play the drums. And it was quite funny sometimes, because some of the time signatures are very odd. Yeah. And they change
a lot.
And they'll go from 4/4 to 7/8.
Yeah, if she has an extra word, the bar is longer. Like that's it.
Yeah. And we have to find out what this guy's name is.
All right, hold on. Really I'm going to get the CD.
Hang on, let's do it. Let's do it. It's killing me because he's got a really unusual name. And he was such a sweet guy.
I'm getting it. Hold on.
He's getting it. I can see a cat. Yeah. Look. Yes, I'm talking to the cat. Have you got any questions, cat?
That's Squid. Hi, Squid.
Meow. Hello, Squid.
Hold on.
Okay, here it comes.
I'm assuming it's full credits on this thing. Well, you're joking. So. It's just copyright info. I could go downstairs and get the vinyl, but that's going to take me longer. We won't. Mark will look it up. Mark will look up the drummer.
Okay. Yeah, it's not a normal name.
How disappointing is that?
It's often the way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Nowadays we don't get credits.
Exactly.
On Spotify. Anyway, so yeah, it would just be the 3 of them. That's it. Most of the session was just the 3 of them, and she'd be out there going, you know, whatever the piano part is, you know. And I'm thinking of that song "Sat in My Lap,"
Yeah.
which is,
Yeah.
it's a
Oh God,
great,
amazing.
and it does. I think that's, well, most of the songs have weird time signature changes, and it was always this funny thing because sometimes she changed differently without realizing it, and so the drummer would he was meticulous, and he was obviously one of those great drummers who could remember everything. He, you know, like that's, I think drummers not only have to have good feel and know how to hit the drum, they also have to have this extraordinary memory, right? And he was extraordinary in that way. And so there'd be constantly this dialogue of like, he'd go, Kate, I really think that when you're going from that second chorus into the next bit, the middle bit, last time you put one more beat and this time you didn't. And she would go, no, I didn't. And it would just, it was almost every song was this like, and he'd go, okay. And they do it again. And it was just like, it was funny because he would turn it round, you know, and sometimes we just edit but
Mark's
it was
just texted
just,
me something, but I think it's the wrong
oh,
record. Hold on. I'm gonna find it.
we got to find it.
Johnny
I'll
Harrow.
probably, no,
No,
no.
that's got to be a band
I
called
can,
Daydreaming.
I
Hold
can
on.
tell you a funny story that she told me.
I would love to hear a funny story that she told you.
She told me about him live. They were doing this tour, and it was the last gig of the tour, probably the tour just before us doing the album.
Preston Heyman.
That's him, Preston.
All right.
Right, not a common name, Preston Heyman. Hey, Preston, if you're out there, miss you.
And
You're awesome.
good on you.
I haven't seen him since. So, but anyway, so he, you know, obviously a lot of Kate Bush songs are toms. It's a lot of toms, isn't it? It's do, 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 and they're tom riffs. And there was some song, one of those songs, and he's playing it, and she thought it would be very funny because she's a bit of a practical joker. He had an absolute fear and aversion to eggs. He's egg phobic. Like, you know, to him, eggs are
Wow.
they're abortions, right?
Well, so let's pretend that that's called ovophobia, just for
Okay,
fun. Okay, so he's got a
there
severe
you
case
go.
of ovophobia.
Yeah, like really bad. Like he can't look at an egg. You know,
Wow.
that bad. She thought it'd be funny. I guess she probably didn't realize how bad this thing was with him. For one of the roadies to drop eggs strategically onto his toms as he's playing this tom part on the last song of the last gig. So he's going, you know, like, and then like splosh, you know. I don't know if these were cooked eggs or raw eggs. And he's like, so he's like, and then it's like, basically he ended up on one tom. And he literally just thought, fuck it. And he walked off, pissed off. And it was just awful. She said, oh, it was so awful because I thought he would think it's funny and he didn't think it was funny. And I was looking at Preston when she was telling this story and he wasn't amused. It was
No.
like, no. So I guess what you know, the reason saying she's very funny, you know, I
Yeah.
mean, she's a genius and have a very, very complicated mind, but she's really, really funny person and young. I mean, she's like a, you know, very much like a young girl in this fantasy world with
Right.
all these characters that she makes up and she wants these characters to come in and out of the record and it's like that's what the record was like. And I guess, you know, I'm not a musician. I've never really played anything, but I love sound, and to me you know, you add reverb to something and it gets a little bit scarier if you know, or it could get more beautiful depending on the chords. So I'm all about that. So, and I've really over the years pushed that even more. And I think that's why I've worked with quite a lot of, let's say, moody, vibey artists where that's what it's all about. It's more about that than, you know, precision playing and all that. So I guess that's why it works. But we had a lot of fun. She had me make, one time she wanted these drums to sound like cannons. So I thought, why don't we make cannons out of the drums? And we had this corrugated iron that had been left over from the Jam, had been in a few weeks before, and they'd bought all this corrugated iron to put around the drum kit to make it sound like a garage. You know, and it worked. It did. It sounded tinny and garage-like, and it was just in the sort of loading bay of the studio where they kept odd bits and pieces. So we dragged them in and made tubes out of them down the corridor. So this kick drum was mic'd up from a distance through these tube corrugated. There's things like that, you know, and sometimes to get the slapback of it being distant, I'd actually put mics down the corridor and sometimes even outdoors round the corner and stuff like that. And, you know, I remember there was another thing where I did this thing on the Public Image record where John was literally having a nap underneath the piano, and we finished. He'd asked me to do something to the track or balance it so he could do a vocal, and he went in and had a nap. So I woke him up and he said, "Can you put the microphone down here? Because I don't want to get up." So I put the microphone like just above, his mouth, but he was lying under the piano. And of course the piano strings resonated and it sounded fantastic. So we did some vocals like that. So I remembered that, and we ended up doing that with Kate, things, silly but great things that made odd sounds, and just trying things and slowing tape down. And there's a song called Leave It Open, where the backing at the end, there's these backward vocals, and it was like she wanted it to sound like she was saying, "We hear them while they're blessing. We hear them while they're blessing." So we're like, well, what's that backwards? So you write it out phonetically and then reverse it. We tried that and then flipped the tape back and it didn't sound right. So then we did it forwards, switched that back, listened to what that sounded like, and she learnt it, and then she sang that, and then we flipped that, and that worked. Right. So if you listen to that Leave It Open at the end, it's got this thing that goes, we hear them while they're, it's all like, right. It's all so we did a lot of fun things like that.
Amazing. It's such a deep record.
It's crazy. I didn't mix the record. In fact, the record, I did like the first 3 months. So all the drums, pretty much. Yeah, I would go as far as say all the drums and piano and bass, and quite a lot of the vocals. Some overdubs, like Paddy came down. There's some violin. So maybe 65%, I would say, roughly, of that record I did. And Hugh did 2 songs, or at least the backing tracks. And then she disappeared. And I didn't know what was going to happen. I thought she built a home studio.
Right.
And she did the rest in her home studio. And I thought, I wonder if I'll ever get asked to go to her home studio and help, but that never happened. I mean, I don't even know where she lives, somewhere out in the countryside. So it's really weird. So the album didn't actually come out till a year later. and was one of the first records ever to be mixed digital.
Right.
So it's very early digital, which is why it sounds very kind of thin and clear. It's not bad, but I remember hearing it, and it didn't have the toughness that I remember it having, and that was because it was early digital. I mean, it was probably like 8-bit, 12-bit, maybe.
We'll say
I
12.
don't know.
Yeah, I don't
Let's say
know.
12.
Let's go 12.
Yeah, and it was I can't remember what tape machine it was. Anyway, it was like no one had ever heard of digital.
Right. It was probably
As
like
far
one of those
as tech.
huge, like 3M digital machines or
Yes,
something.
it
Yeah.
was. It was. That's exactly what it was. And I think it was mixed at Advision Studios. So I actually have rough mixes of it.
I will pay you money.
Unfortunately, yes. Well, they're on cassette,
I
so they're
will buy
very
you a
analog.
cassette deck.
Okay, you need to. Yes, yeah, yeah. I
Wow.
have that. I have that. So, and it's it's basically there. It's all there. She did do quite a lot of vocals again because more character and all that. But yeah, I mean, fantastic, fantastic record. I remember that song Houdini was
Yeah.
really fun.
Did
It
you
was all fun. Yeah.
So I was just gonna ask, did you record Eberhard Weber? Because he played bass on, was it on Houdini? It was on one of them. He played upright on
Maybe, yes.
yeah, he's
But
just an amazing one of the sort of Norwegian new jazz guys, real sort of ambient things. Like he did an amazing record with upright bass and DX7 and a bunch of effects and
right.
things like that. But
Wow.
then I saw his name on the Kate Bush record, and that was like mind blown because you don't think that these universes ever collide, but of course,
Right.
musicians they do.
They do, yeah. So yeah, you know what? I don't remember if
Well,
he came down. I do remember recording double bass, but if I would think maybe Dell played it. I know he played fretless.
yeah.
Oh, and here's another little interesting fact. So, Public Image left their equipment at the Townhouse, not on purpose. They just didn't pick it up for a while, and they Jar Wobble's bass, which is an Ampeg bass, which has F holes,
Oh yeah,
it looks
yeah.
like a big violin and it has a scroll on the end. That was there. And Kate saw it and just thought, wow, cool looking bass. Is that a proper electric bass? And Dell picked it up and it just sounded amazing. And it was fretless. And really on the Public Image record, there is no bass. I think there's maybe bass on 2 songs because Jar Wobble wasn't in the band anymore.
Right.
And so there was no bass on the. So basically, most of the bass on Kate Bush's Dreaming is Jar Wobble's bass that apparently Public Image had bought, so they weren't going to give it to Jar Wobble when he left. So it's all over that record.
That's
and I
funny.
think Dell ended up buying one of his own because it's just, I mean, he's a great bass player and he knew how to play fretless bass. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I just don't know whether Jar Wobble was playing for that bass. He probably played it on a couple of songs, but I can't imagine that all public. I mean, it's all real sort of dub things.
Yeah.
It's not exactly it's not a slidey thing. So, yeah, it was. I mean, there was a funny incident. I could tell you. I mean, I'm trying to think back at funny incidences. There's one very, very funny incident that happened. There's on one song. I think it might be Houdini, but maybe not. There's a big build-up, and it's got like opera singers. It's like the piano's building up, and it's like a big crescendo, huge. It really, really, really builds up. I could listen through the album and find it, and then it reaches the summit, of this huge mountainous buildup, and then nothing happens. And I think Kate had this idea that it would drop down to her playing quietly or something. But somehow we spent so much effort building it up to this enormous thing, and it was spectacular, that she wasn't sure what was going to happen next, or she'd forgotten what was. It was this thing, and it wasn't like a big deal, but it was this thing. She was going, "Oh, what? We've built it up, and now nothing happens. What are we going to do?" And it was like, well, it could just drop down to. She said, "Oh, we need something. Something needs to happen. Have you got any ideas?" And then she said, "Well, have a think about it." And she went off, out of the room to get something, get a cup of tea or whatever. And the assistant engineer, who was a cheeky chap, said, Nick, put the microphone up, quick, I've got this idea to put on there. I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, go on, quick, before she comes back. And he went out there and he said, just play that bit, put it in record. He went up and basically, and he said, put reverb on it. So put reverb. And so he went out there, and as it welled up, and I mean, it's massive, this thing. And it gets to the end, and he just did this with his mouth, going, like a huge raspberry, like a Monty Python type thing. It was totally Monty Python, like when the foot comes down.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was hysterical. And I was like, we can't play that to Kate. He said, no, she'll think it's really funny. She's got a sense of humor. Go and play it to her. I was like, I'm not there's no way. I said, that's really rude. and just at that moment, she came in and said, did I hear rude? Rude. He says, what's going on? Did you think of something? And he said, yeah, Nick thought of this idea. Go and play it, Nick.
Nick thought of it.
I said, no, it's not my idea. It's really, you've got to take credit for it. He said, I'm not taking credit for it. And she was like, go and play it. You've got an idea. He said, what? You recorded it already? And I said, okay, look. I said, we're going to play it. But I might have to leave the room. Or she said, no, stay. I said, all right. So we played it. And it, and it was playing loud, and I put extra amount of reverb on it. And I was just like, oh my God, this could be awful because,
Yeah, is it making fun of the music?
Well,
she's
a serious artist.
Yeah.
And, you just don't know how these things are going to be taken. And it builds up, and sure enough, it gets to the end, and there's a slight gap. You see, it's like, And I didn't want to look. There was silence, and I pushed the stop button, and I looked at the assistant guy, and he was just holding his face. He was just like pissing himself laughing, but dared not saying. And I looked over, and Kate was like it seemed to go on for an hour, and then suddenly she just burst out in laughter, and literally I think she burst out of laughter and the swivel chair, and then fell over. It was just we were, what was I, 21, she's 22, just kids, crazy kids in a very expensive studio.
God, I can't believe that
recording raspberries.
How did that not make it onto the record?
I know.
A genius.
I miss it. You
do it in your mind whenever you hear the song.
Yeah, I do. Every time. But my God, it was an anxious minute.
That is genius. Because it is, you get into this mode in the studio, especially when you're younger, where it's just playground time. But when you're young, you'd never quite realize you've crossed the line until you can barely see it anymore. Right. And then someone tells you, by the way, that wasn't cool. So, well played. You got away with it.
It was fun. She thought it was hilarious. And so there you go. So she's, she doesn't take herself that seriously.
No, that's fine. She probably took that long because she was trying to pretend she was angry.
I don't know what the delayed reaction was. Maybe she was processing it as in, is this a serious idea?
Right, right,
Maybe it's a serious. I mean, she's definitely a huge Monty Python fan,
right.
and it did sound Monty Python-esque. So maybe she thought it was a serious suggestion. And maybe that was what it was, that she looked at the assistant and saw that he was giggling and thought, oh, it's a joke.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I don't know. I don't know.
Amazing.
But yeah.
Amazing. Well, look,
Yeah.
we're at 2 hours, and you're still
Yes.
21 years old. So,
Thank you. Thank you. I know I look young for
and
my
you don't
age.
look a
Thank you
day
very
over
much.
20. So,
I know, it's
what's your time
incredible.
situation like?
Well, maybe I should just ask my sister,
Yes,
who's
go.
because I'm actually in my sister the bedroom that my sister's in,
Oh, right.
because the internet worked better. Let me just check that they're all okay.
Okay.
Can I do
Absolutely.
30 seconds?
You can have
I don't
34 seconds if you want.
I don't have a cat to
Well, I've
put
got
in
one here.
place of
Here,
me.
I'll move out of the way so everybody can see
Okay.
the squid.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay.
Just give me 1 second.
All right. It's hard to believe that I've heard my first Kate Bush fart story, and it's just made my night. That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And it also really bothers me just that the CD has 0 credits. Like none. Absolutely none. And I don't think this is a reissue. I mean, I bought this way back when. So we could talk about that for a minute. But not really. But we'll see. Because this might be another Steve Lillywhite situation. We might be going to part 2 and then part 5 and then part 74. Because there's so much left to do. Yeah, just, 30 years.
Actually, say hello. This is Andrew here. Here's my sister.
Hello. Hello.
Nice
Lovely to meet
you.
You too. You can't hear me.
I'm just gonna grab.
Well,
Stuff.
I don't know what I've done with it. Just. Oh, here we go. That's it.
All right.
I'll leave you to it.
All right.
Bye.
Okay.
all right.
Hang on a minute. Headphones.
So you're good for a bit?
Yes.
All right, excellent. Well, and I would like to say that as part of my endless research, I did actually look up your sister's art, and it's quite awesome. She's got a great website.
Amazing. Oh my God, she is incredible. There's some of it up.
Melissa
up on the
Launay.
wall
So
here.
just look her
Yes.
up. Check out the site.
Yeah.
Really, really cool.
Also, well, I go to her website, and if you look through it, I think it's under portraits or on her website or commissioned work. I think it's called commissioned work. So it was Nick Cave's birthday, 50th birthday. And I thought, I really want to get him something special. And he had met Melissa and learned that she was an artist, and I showed him some of her work, and he absolutely loved it. And so I thought, I've got it. I'll get my sister to do a painting for him. And so she said, oh, well, he's a very interesting looking man. Maybe I'll do a picture that includes him. And I said, oh, maybe a lot of his fans do that. Why don't if you do one of him and his wife, Susie, I'm sure he'll love that. And she said, oh, I've got an idea. So she basically did this incredible portrait, which you can see on her website, of him and Susie. And it's absolutely extraordinary what she did, because she painted him and her, and it looks like they're in paradise in this picture frame. And then outside the picture frame, there are these dragons and fire. And when I saw it, I said to her, this is amazing. But what led you to do that double frame thing where outside? And she said, I don't know. She said, I just felt like when he's with Susie, when he's with her, he's protected, and when he's not with her, he's outside with the dragons.
Wow.
And it's an incredible thing because she didn't know anything about him, his history, and that he used to dabble with a drug that is known as chasing the dragon, right?
Yeah.
So it's just an incredible painting.
Wow.
And you'll see it. And then, so a year or two later, it was Karen O from the AE's birthday. It was her 30th birthday. And again, I think she had met Melissa as well. But anyway, I thought I'll ask the same. Melissa loved doing the painting, and it was all. Nick absolutely loves the paint. He has it. Well, I don't know if he still does, but he used to in England. He had it above their bed. That's how much he liked the painting.
Like Franco,
which is great. Yeah, like Franco. So she does this. I said, just do whatever you feel. And so she does this painting of Karen riding this wild beast that looks a bit like a tiger lion with a smiley face in this crazy forest, which is full of little creatures. And I get the painting to give to Karen, and I like, this is amazing. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful. When you see it, you'll see it's just fantastic painting, and it's I said, it looks like something very specific to me that I know about, but no one else knows about. Why did you paint? Why did you put her on top of this sort of funny-looking creature, animal, forest beast? And she said, I don't know. She's kind of wild, and I figured that she would have a pet, and she would probably ride on the back of it. So I said, well, it looks to me like Where the Wild Things Are, the book,
right.
The what's his name?
Maurice Sendak.
Yeah. It looks very like that. It's not a copy, but it's a similar kind of vibe. And she said, oh, yeah, it does a bit. I said, did you know that she has just finished writing the score to that movie, but nobody knows? It hasn't been announced. Nobody knows. And she goes, oh, well, that's really odd. I mean, it's just one of those things. But yeah, I love her paintings. But those two are very special.
Wow, I would say.
And Karen has that painting. She has a child now, and it's in her kids. It's just outside her kids' bedroom. It's great.
I would say that if your sister ever tells you to either do or not do something, you should heed her words.
Trust me, I have.
Okay, good.
It's like that.
She's in tune to something.
Totally like that. Yeah. Yes, true.
Right. Well, so enough about your family. Let's talk about you.
Enough. Yeah, I know.
Well, all right. Should we? We haven't really talked about. I mean,
I'm going to interview you, by the way. I want to interview you.
I've got nothing to say. I've got absolutely nothing to say.
Don't believe it.
Well, look. So we've just glanced across Killing Joke, Slits, Gang of Four. We can stop there for a second, or because after that, I think we get into Midnight Oil, which is a bit of a turning point, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So up to you how quickly we go through that little transition, and if we've missed anything major in there.
I mean, all those bands, Gang of Four, incredible. I mean, and again, that session was very similar to the birthday party, and it was done in 2 days very quickly, and it was just intense but fantastic. And Killing Joke was very interesting. What happened? I could tell you one incident.
As much as you want. I mean, I'm here all night. I live here, so.
Well, I'll tell this little story that happened. So when So when the session was booked, and the band arrived, but only 3 of them arrived without Youth, who's the bass player, also known as Martin Glover, who's a great record producer.
Yeah.
Has gone on to be a great record producer after Killing Joke. He wasn't there. We started setting things up. We started recording. So I think day 2, day 3, still not there. I don't know where he is. I didn't really ask. I don't know. But everything's go, go, go. I mean, and we're dealing with Jazz, the singer, who is extremely demanding and very, I mean, he's quite a scary character, you know. He's like an Egyptian pharaoh, and you know, he's got a darkness to him, and the music was just incredible. I mean, it was just I love Killing Joke. I'd been to many of their gigs, and it all happened very naturally. And anyway, day 3, I think it was, the phone rings and they said, could you send one of the band up, or one of his friends up, because the police have just arrived and they're delivering the bass player. And so I was like, what? So go up there, and sure enough, there's the police. They're not the police. They're sort of the police. They're sort of like, basically, they're mental institution home type police, you know, medic police. And there is Youth in a straitjacket like this. And, you know, at the time, Youth looked a lot like Sid Vicious. You know, he had spiky hair, good looking guy, you know, but very, very punk rock, Sid Vicious looking, in a straitjacket, and completely out to lunch. I mean, like, not there. He was standing, but he could, you know, I think if he wasn't held up, he would have fallen over. So they, you know, they signed it over, and I think, you know, one of Killing Joke signed for him. Went down to the studio and he fell asleep. He was exhausted. He fell asleep. Anyway, come that evening, the band really wanted bass guitar on the song, so they were like, "Wake up, Youth!" Nod, and he's like, "What the fuck's going on?" And so they basically got the fire extinguishers that were dry ice, you know, not wet, because it's put out fires with the equipment, so it didn't damage the equipment. So they sprayed this dry ice on him. It's like, and there's all this big cloud of, and he wakes up, and sure enough, very much woken up, gets up, puts the bass on, and overdubs this killer bass part to Follow the Leaders, that song for Leaders, which is a great bass line. One take, perfect, brilliant, back to sleep. And I was like, what happened? Why was he delivered here? And so the story was that he basically took some acid, went into his bank on King's Road, got some money out, not all his money, I don't think, put it on the floor, took all his clothes off, set the whole lot on fire, and walked down King's Road naked. And they arrested him and took him off to the mental home because he was just off. You know, you can't make this shit up. And, you know, but anyway, he was great. But it's so funny to me because the Youth, or the Martin that I know, was that guy who was mostly asleep, get up and play bass, and was completely out of it most of the time, that album. And he doesn't, I've spoken to him since, we're still friends. In fact, he has a studio in Granada, and I'm going to go and visit him in a couple of days to see his studio. But he doesn't remember that session at all. He thinks he does, but we've talked about it, and I was like, no, that's not that record. It's a different record. And it's a very funny thing. Okay, so that's one story. Another story is, it was Jazz's birthday, but at this point, I'm mixing the record, and they're all just around, sitting behind me, and it's Jazz's birthday, so a lot of their friends came down, and their friends were freaks. I mean, there was a midget with a top hat who looked straight out of Oliver, Oliver Twist. Had a a watch with a
Right, the
thing,
waistcoat and
big top hat that made him taller. I mean, a huge top hat, and he was very jolly. And there was a guy called the Wizard who had a tattoo of a spider's web on his face, coming from his nose out like that. And all these kind of gothy punks, I mean, I thought that Susie from the Banshees was there. Perhaps it wasn't. I don't think it was actually her, but there was a girl who looked like that, a lot like her. Anyway, I was busy mixing, and I'm much younger than them because they're a bit older, and mixing away. And Geordie, who's a real prankster, the guitarist, comes up and he says, "Hey, Nick, do you want a piece of cake? Someone's bought a cake for Jazz. Do you want a piece of cake?" And Jazz goes, "Yeah. Do you want a piece of cake, Nick?" And I was like, "Yeah, all right." He said, "Go on, have a big piece."
oh, you should have known better.
So I eat this chocolate cake, and I'm like mixing, and I go for this knob on the desk, I reach out to it, and the knob comes at me like, and I go like, "What's that?" And I go to another one, and it's like, "Wow!" And I'm like, "What is going on?" And I look at the speaker pumping. It's like, boom, 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 boom. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm like, Jesus. And I'm looking at the whole desk, and all the lines on the desk are wobbling. And they can see that I'm freaking out. Like, I'm going, what's going on? And here in the background, "Are you all right, Nick? You're all right, Nick. You're all right, Nick. You're all right." And I turn around on the chair swivels, and the whole room just goes, and they're pissing themselves laughing. And they're going, "What's going on? What's going on?" Like this. I'm like, what on earth has happened? And I thought, they spiked my drink. Right? And I was like, I know what I'll do. I'll eat some more chocolate cake. So I had another bite. And then I was like, maybe, what's going on? And then I thought, I cannot mix the record. I tried, and I was everything was exaggerated. Whatever I thought about got massively exaggerated. So I ended up going over and sitting on the couch. I was looking around the room, and there's all these freaky people that look freaky anyway. And it was just like a Fellini movie, it was like insane. So I thought, I can't stay in this room. So I left, walked down the corridor. In the townhouse, there was this very long, thin corridor. As I walked down, and my mind's going, okay, I've just got to not concentrate on anything too much, because whenever I concentrate on it, it expands or gets bigger or turns into something. I'm looking and like, oh my God, there's cousin It, from the Munsters, or long hair.
Yeah.
This character with just long hair. I'm like, at the end of the corridor is cousin It. I'm like, how can I be imagining cousin It? That's ridiculous. That's not like looking at something and it's exaggerated. That's cousin It. So I kind of speed up to catch up with cousin It, go around the corner, nobody's there. I'm like, oh my God. So I go to the kitchen, I'm hungry, find some cheese, and of course they put cheese in my mouth, in the hole my mouth. So I'm like, this is stupid. I've just got to lie down and go to sleep, and hopefully I'll be all right in the morning. I go to sleep. I find that there's a rooms upstairs. I go to sleep. I wake up in the morning and I'm fine. And I do remember the craziness. I go downstairs, and the band, obviously went home. I'm just on my own in this canteen at the Townhouse, having some breakfast. And in walks Steve Howe from Yes.
From Yes, yeah.
Because Yes were in the other studio while we were doing Killing Joke. In with him walks his wife. His wife has hair all the way down to the floor. I mean, the longest hair you've ever seen. And so I was like,
Cousin
he's
It.
married to Cousin It. So actually wasn't imagining that bit. But it was just a funny thing. And then I went down to the studio and the band turned up and they were really concerned. They were like, oh, we thought you might have gone for a walk and got run over. We sent out a search party. We were out for hours combing the area trying to find you. We were really worried. And I thought, wow, that's really nice. You know, here are these really horrible, ghastly people who make this evil music that's, you know, sort of like, you know, black magic worshipping pyramids and stuff. And they'd always been really kind of cheeky and nasty, actually, you know, to me, because I was a geeky kid. Like, they were kind of bullies, you know, and I thought, oh, they're actually really nice people. It's just taking the piss. It's just that English thing of taking it all along. So that was quite a turning point where I thought, oh, yeah, they do care. So anyway, that was really nice. And, you know, remained friends with them. But yes, that was my Killing Joke experience.
Good God.
Good God, man.
And I love that your response to it is, I'll have some more cake. That'll help.
Yeah, that'll help. Yeah, wash the acid drink down, you know.
Yeah.
I was very, I mean, I was still living at home with my mum at this point, you know. So with my mum and brother. So, yeah, crazy stuff. Yeah. And then a whole bunch of years went by and do an Idols record.
Yeah. No, we can't skip everything. We can't skip everything.
Okay, we'll have to be selective.
Okay, you want to do this all in one go and just make it shorter?
Well,
because
I don't know. I mean, if we go through, if we go through Midnight Oil, INXS, Silverchair,
yeah, I mean,
Arcade Fire,
do the Australian
nine Nick Cave albums,
exactly,
eight maybe. Grinder Man,
yeah, and that skipping,
yeah, 3 years up, yeah,
and the Church and Talking Heads and Posies and Maximo Park and Level 42 in the middle of that.
My God,
what?
You're diving deep.
Well, exactly. But so we can go quick, or we can say we'll do a part 2 and we'll just go until you're sick of it. It's completely up to you.
Okay. We'll pick random ones. We'll do a part 2 eventually.
Okay, eventually we'll do a part 2. But we won't, because you're a very, very busy man, and to get you with a Monday that's free,
we could find out from the listeners what they're interested in. And
all right.
Well, target them.
I think we have to talk about Midnight Oil, only because like that was it doesn't have to be a real long thing, but that was like, what was the first session outside of the Townhouse that you did? When did you finally make your foray?
Well, the Midnight Oil 1098 was made at the Townhouse.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, very much so. I did do one. The first record I did outside the Townhouse was with the Slits.
Right.
But it wasn't this. I don't think it got released. I did 2 songs with the Slits. There was Earthbeat and another song that's on the same album. That was done at the Townhouse. Oh, maybe it was. Maybe those songs were recorded. I don't know. I did. Basically, there was no time at the no studio time available when I was working with the Slits. Was asked to work with them, so we went to another studio and we recorded those songs, and then we mixed them at the Townhouse. I think that's what happened. So that would have been the first thing. I don't know. I mean, I worked there. I did most records there. I mean, I think, the INXS, The Swing, that was recorded at the Manor. That was the Manor. So I did quite a lot of sessions at the Manor.
Right. Another Virgin studio.
Yeah, it belonged to Richard Branson.
Yeah.
And I can't remember. I mean, at some point, I started mixing at Rack a
Right.
lot. And my assistant was always Nigel Godrich. I really loved him. I mean, obviously, he was very young. He's younger than me, and he was an assistant. He was amazing because I'll tell you what he did. You know, this was this was in the mid-80s when people could take up to 4 days to do a mix, and it wasn't unusual. I mean, the budgets were just, you didn't even know how much money you had. You just kept going until it was done. And I also at the time, I'd done a couple of 12-inch remixes for INXS that were hugely popular. So I did, and it was that era when every single had to have a 12-inch remix because they made a lot of money out of that. So I made a lot of 12-inch remixes of rock songs and made them more danceable without replacing the drums with a machine. I would just do stuff that made it a bit more of a groove, like added percussion and made them like 7 minutes long. And I did all that stuff. There were quite a few, and I did all that at Rack, and I used to edit them on 1/2-inch tape because this was still before digital really came into its own. I mean, there were some Mitsubishi digital machines and Sony digital machines, but I didn't use them. I liked analog better, and I did all my edits with sticky tape. And when I was mixing away and I was doing all these experimental mixes with echoes and stuff, Nigel would often listen, and then I'd do something and I'd play it back, and he'd listen. He'd go, about 2 hours ago, you did this thing where you had an echo on that instrument instead of that instrument, and it was really good. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I remember that. And I'd change it back. So he was very interested and really paying attention. And he was very good at, like, that's really good. You should do that. Because I, at that point, was so being so indulgent in my own madness. And it was madness because I had endless studio time and I worked 18-hour days on these things. I was obsessed. And I really, as you know, if you spend too long on something, it actually gets worse. You end up losing the whole point of the song. And I really did get into that stage of just like absolute bullshit kind of stuff I was doing. I mean, I could have done better mixes if I limited my time. But he was really good because he would go, that was really good. That's brilliant. He'd come in and go, fucking hell, what's going on? Let's have a listen. And I'd play it and he'd go, that's great. And I was like, oh, okay, good. So in a way, when I was doing the 12-inch mixes, I became the artist, and he, in a way, was like guiding me as almost like a record producer.
Right.
So it was no surprise to me that he suddenly, I mean, I think I'd moved to Australia and he did OK Computer. And I remember listening to it and seeing his name on it. And I rang him up and said, fucking hell, man, you've done something incredible here. That's a great album. He's like, oh, thank you. And then it really exploded, I love Nigel. I bump into him now and then. And he lives partly in LA, not far from where I live. Lovely guy. And he was always reading cosmic books. There was a book called Cosmic Trigger. I don't know who it's by, but it's about supernatural and channeling thoughts and pyramids and all that stuff. Really into that stuff. He was always reading these books and he would tell me to read them. And of course, I never had time, but I did read Cosmic Trigger and loved it. Absolutely love Cosmic Trigger. And the other thing he did, which is very amusing to us both, is that I'd be so obsessed doing this thing and he'd go, cup of tea. And I go, yeah, because England, you drink cup of tea.
Not allowed to say
and
no.
So he'd bring a cup of tea and he'd put it on this ledge behind, And then, you know, an hour or so later, you go, cup of tea. And I go, yeah, yeah. And he would basically grab the cup of tea that I had put on the back, which I had maybe sipped one sip out of. And he'd go out, come back with another cup of tea. And an hour later, cup of tea, all day long, right? And so years and years and years later, in LA, we're talking 20 years later, we're reminiscing. And he said, oh, I got a question for you. He said, did you like my cups of tea? And I said, yeah, I did. I said, I enjoyed the book thing. He said, no. Cups of tea, were they good? Did I make a good cup of tea? And I said, yeah. As far as I remember, I cut a good cup of tea. He said, I've got a confession. I said, you have? And he said, I only ever made you one cup of tea. I said, what, ever? And he said, well, in a week, I might have made you 3. I was like, what? He said, yeah. He said, you never drank it. So I would just take the cup out, wait for a minute, and come back in with the same cup.
Cold.
Because you never drank. Yeah. But by the time I actually got round to picking it up and it was cold, I wasn't surprised because I'd left it there too long. Like, oh,
I love that he'd even keep them overnight too.
Yeah. Ridiculous. I guess I'm English, but not very English because I didn't drink my cups of tea. And I quite liked cold cups of tea, I suppose.
Well, it's all you had. You didn't know any better.
No, I knew nothing. So yeah.
That's fun. So you're tracking on an SSL and mixing on an API?
No, at that time, you see, because I learnt on an SSL, I mixed on an SSL, and Rack had an SSL.
Oh, Rack had the SSL. Oh, in the side.
I was in the the other room. Yeah.
Right.
I didn't discover APIs and Neves until later, and of course, when I did, I was like, oh my God.
Right. Yes.
So, but yeah, all those 80s records I made were all done on SSLs. That's all I knew.
Right.
I was a bit scared of Neves. I was like, they've got these big, they were like, you know, Lego, and then you've got Duplo, you know,
exactly.
Duplo? Yeah, which is the beat. To me, it was like, where are all the knobs gone? Where are all the buttons gone? It's like Duplo. I can't do anything with this. That's the point. You don't need to because it sounds incredible.
Yeah.
You don't need to do much. It's just a different thing. So I was used to really tweaking things, and I was hyperactive. I was young, nimble fingers and all that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, all right. So what is the record that kind of got you onto Neve API things? I mean, I said I wouldn't ask about gear, but we can talk about a record that way.
Yeah.
Like, what was the transition?
Well, I think I didn't really go to Neves and APIs until I actually came to America. So it probably wasn't until the late 90s.
Oh, right.
Honestly, yeah.
Can we skip all of the other stuff? We can't really skip everything in there. We got to talk a little bit about INXS and Talking Heads. Should we briefly?
Yeah, sure. Well, so INXS I did. That was 1982, 83. So that wasn't long after. And the reason was that Michael Hutchins loved Gang of Four.
Right.
That's why I got to do that record. Well, also that I had done the 1098 album with Midnight Oil, which was a massive hit.
Yeah, gigantic.
In Australia, huge. I mean, I think it stayed in the top 50 in Australia for 2 years. Or maybe top 100 for 2 years.
Wow.
It's like the dark side of the moon of Australia, that record. Very loved record. And so, you know, and it's very produced sonically. So INXS asked me, but I really think that my name came up more. Gang of Four. Michael was really cool. He had great taste. He loved very, very... He didn't like pop music. He liked all the sort of, you know, new wave bands. I mean, they were all huge XTC and Talking Heads fans, which
right.
I was. So that's how we bonded. And I'm more or less the same age as them. So that was fun. I mean, I love that band, and Michael in particular is just he's one of my closest friends, and um, they were great. We did that album at the Manor and mixed it all over the world. It was
Right.
nuts. I mean, we ran out of studio time, ended up going to Sydney, where there was a studio called Rhinoceros
Mm.
that they ended up buying, and it took a long time to make that record, and it was exhausting because I just kept traveling. Um, it wasn't exhausting because of them; it was exhausting because of me. I by this point was just obsessed with sound and just wanted it to be perfect, and I hadn't learned that lesson that the more you work on something, the more you lose the plot. Um, and because those early records, Flowers of Romance, I didn't know what I was doing. It was all instinct,
And they were
and that
super quick.
and they're super quick, and that's why they're great. And so later on, sort of probably by mid-90s, the penny dropped with that, where I went back to my roots, I
Mm.
suppose, and thought I just can't. I've got to make these records quicker because they're better. And then, of course, working with Nick Cave was a revelation because you talk about quick. I mean, 4 days. I'm not kidding. Grinder Man first record, 4 days. Um, Abattoir Blues, Live Orpheus, which was actually 24 songs,
Mm.
right? 10 days.
And that's
It's
including,
nuts.
that's from like
Not, not,
him
no.
playing the band a
That's
song, right?
that. That's no demos,
Yeah.
right? Band turning up from all over the world. No one's heard anything. Push record. First take is like a rehearsal. Second take is vibey and fantastic, and bits are wrong, bits are out of tune, bits are played wrong. People are playing choruses, all that kind of stuff. Take three is really good, right? Really, really good. And that point, Nick is literally either getting off the piano and walking in to hear it, or he's turned the page and he's on to the next song. And there is no fourth take. And he's by the end of the second take, he's already done.
Right.
And it's me going, he's going, oh, that's done, right? So anyway, I've got this other song. And you go,
One
Nick,
more.
can we do one more? Why? I go, well, I think it would be really good. The real reason in my mind is I only just got the sounds and levels, but that's fine. That doesn't matter.
Yeah. But they
But
haven't
if
actually
you just
played.
do one more,
Yeah.
because maybe we could, and I'm in my mind, I'm like, I could use the intro, or I could edit between them, or I can do all this stuff, and I'll say, well, how about try one a little faster? Why? Well, because it sounds a bit slow. Is that bad? Have you been listening to the Red Hot Chili Peppers or something? And I'm like, no, no, it's not that.
I love that's his reference for that.
Yeah, well, he didn't know. Actually, it's funny. He didn't, because he has made some pretty bad comments about Red Hot Chili Peppers in the press a few times. No, he had no idea who they were.
Right.
He really didn't know. It was just the name. He remembered the name. He would say, "Have you been working with those LA punk bands like Red Hot Chili Peppers?" And I go, "No, I haven't. I've never worked with them." No, I was like, really like Red Hot. And I thought Blood Sugars. I like them. But he would just say that, and I'd go, no, no, no. I just think, and what works is that, and I worked this out very quickly because it was the same with Johnny Rotten. It's the same work with Lou Reed as well, and it's the same thing. If you back off, if you say, "How about we do this?" and they go, "Why?" or "No," or or literally asking the question, why do we want to do another take when we've already done 2 takes? If you back off and go, all right, we won't do it, obviously you won't get the third take, very important. But also, why are you there?
Right.
If you have no opinion, come the next record, you're not going to be there because you haven't added anything. So I was like, I actually did have an opinion. My opinion was the song was too slow. So I would say to Nick, because it sounds a bit slow, is there anything wrong with that? And I'll go, yeah, it sounds like old people playing. Oh, fuck, really? Do we sound like old people? And I go, yeah, it does sound a little bit, because to me, it did. And
Right.
to me, right? To me, if you listen to Nocturama, it's a very slow, nothing wrong with it, by the way. And I remember on that album, I really did say it sounds like, and that was the kind of thing that really meant something to, and that was a valid opinion.
Right.
And so he'd go, all right, let's do it. All right, let's do it, pick it up a bit. And he would play it a little bit more like this. And it was better. They'd come in and agree. It was better. So that's, I think, in the end, I got confidence. I mean, it's very hard to have confidence around someone who's kind of belligerent, and so it worked really well, and that's why it worked well, me working with Nick, because he did want my opinion, and he would often ask, we don't sound like old people, right? I was like, no, it sounds great.
You
And he'd
obviously
go, okay.
pushed a button there.
It really pushed, and there was a few buttons like that. There was quite a few. There was a few funny buttons,
right?
Because it's constant humor. I mean, talk about taking the piss. It's just constant. Him and Mick Harvey and Warren and all of them, it's just constant. And you have to be witty back, otherwise you're not part of the gang.
You get run all over.
You get run over, and you can't have a conversation even. It's like, and I really would stand my ground, and it became really, it was funny. I mean, Grinder Man was hilarious record, because that was a record that he wasn't really taking that seriously. It was a bit of fun, where the idea was he was going to play guitar, and they turned up, and even his image was different. He had the handlebar mustache. He was wearing a leather jacket, a tanned leather jacket, and very pointy kind of crocodile shoes. He looked like a pimp, And Warren had grown this big beard, which he didn't have before. So they walked into the studio at Rack. We did that at Rack. We recorded that in the API room. And they walked in, and I was like, it's like a different band. There's just four of them. And it was like, the attitude was incredible. And then what had transpired is that they'd done a tour which was called Nick Cave. It wasn't called Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, it was Nick Cave. And they did Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds songs, but it was just four of them. And it was really fun for them. And Nick did pick up a guitar and make some noises. So Warren said, yeah, we should do an album with you playing guitar. And he liked that idea. And then Warren said to him, yeah, why don't you write about different things? And Nick was like, what do you mean? He said, well, he said, you're always writing about, the Lord and death and, fights and stuff like that. And he goes, yeah, well, what else is there to write about? Sex? And of course, Warren says, yeah. And he goes, oh, all right, I'll write about. And the Grinder Man, if you listen to it, every song is about sex, really. Right. It's about men and women and the relationship between men and women, but it's very sexual, and that's why they call Grinder Man. And it was a fun record for Nick, and the idea was that record was going to come out, and it was going to not mention that it was Nick Cave. There was going to be no publicity at all. The cover was not going to have any pictures of them on it, and it was not going to be mentioned that it was Nick Cave's another band. Of course, people heard it, and of course his voice is so distinctive that didn't really work. But what was surprising was that young people, kids, loved that record, and it changed everything for Nick, because he got quite comfortable and quite satisfied with the older audience, which were roughly his age.
Right.
And then suddenly, obviously Abattoir Blues and Lyre of Orpheus was, it had quite a few more upbeat songs, especially Abattoir Blues is it's almost Motowny kind of vibe. But Grinder Man, if you listen to Dig Lazarus Dig, it's
Yeah.
almost like a continuation of Grinder Man, except that the lyrics have gone back to sort
death.
of Greek mythology.
Yeah.
The Greeks stepped in at that point.
It's funny because you see this with authors actually quite a bit. Like John Banville, very, very serious author, writes amazingly meticulous books, and he labors over every word. And he started writing detective novels as Benjamin Black because he's like, fuck, man, I'm sick of having to write everything like this. I just want to write without feeling like I need to be John Banville anymore. And it freed him up to do this stuff. And to do that as an artist, I mean, Nick's not going to write songs about sex for Nick Cave and the Bad Seed. That's just not what they do.
Right. Yeah.
But to be able to create the persona, and I love the fact that he was dressed differently, the facial hair, it's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. And very popular. I mean, the Grinder Man record, when it first came out at least, didn't even have a proper CD cover. It was just a piece of cardboard, with a monkey on it. It was just like, I mean, it's the cheapest thing. And, it was so popular. And I think what really made it popular was their appearance on the Jules Holland. It was such a good performance. And people were just like, whoa, what is that? And that triggered it. And then people started listening to the record. And the record is it's an amazing record. I love that record.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the closest thing I've ever done to raw power, which I love. I love raw power. Iggy Pop's. I love Iggy Pop. So, and it's just it's really something, and it changed things, for the better.
Did Nick ever mind? Did he ever feel like, why is this more popular than my serious stuff? Or
no, I think he loved it. I think he loved it. I think he loved it that suddenly there were young people coming to the gigs.
Right.
Like really young.
Well, I mean, because he did Coachella.
Teenagers.
He did Coachella, that year, the year after, something. We saw him. It was an amazing set. Absolutely amazing. And it was full of young people. And he's walking on the crowd and Yeah,
and the Bad Seeds played on the big stage later or the next day. It was very
I think,
I actually mixed Bad Seed live to air at that Coachella thing,
right?
And but I didn't mix Grinder Man. That wasn't recorded even, I think, unfortunately. So I went to
second stage.
Incredible gig. It was an incredible gig. Yeah, and there was fun. That was so much fun. And then Grinder Man 2 is equally a brilliant record. It's slightly more evolved. I'm hoping that we do another one. I think it's totally possible. It's talked about.
Right.
You know, Warren what really wants to do one. So I hope it happens.
It's funny. You got to wonder, if what we were talking about before, if Grinder Man progresses too far, then it's no longer Grinder Man. No matter what it is, it's not Grinder Man anymore. It's because it was an aberration and it was a release. And yeah. Well, and I'd love to go back to something you were talking about before with the sort of when the penny dropped about making records quickly and not taking advantage of the fact that you had this endless studio time, realizing that just because you had it didn't mean you should use it. And I'm wondering, because there are a lot of bands that will make their first record super cheap with somebody, but then that's a little popular, like, ooh, now we can hire so-and-so and we can go somewhere to make a record. And sometimes that works because that's really the ambition they always had. But sometimes it's just window shopping. And it kind of goes against the thing. And I'm wondering sort of artistically what your thoughts are on that. Because obviously you feel like from a production standpoint, that makes sense.
Well, I find in particular working with solo artists that you end up producing more. And because they very often don't have a band. They have maybe one or two musicians that they really like. And then you bring in other people that and it always takes longer with solo artists, and it's more elaborate, and it's okay. I mean, I did an album that I'm very, very fond of with Anna Calvi,
Yeah,
who's a
beautiful, great
great
record.
artist. I mean, she's like, she's a bit like another Kate Bush, really, and her imagination is endlessly out there, and she's super talented. And that took a long time to make that record, because it was endless experimenting, and she had this thing which I hadn't really come across before. With every song, we'll get it to a stage. Like, we had a plan, or she had a demo that she did on her own, and it was the song, and I'd have arrangement ideas and a plan of how to do it. And obviously we do it that way, because that's why I'm there. And then it would turn out a certain way, and then she'd listen to it, and sometimes it was kind of what she was hoping, and sometimes it was different. So then she'd question, and that's fine, and that happens quite often. And then it would be the discussion, deep discussion, about whether it was better than how she thought it was going to be or not. So we should try it the way she thought it was going to be, and we'd take it that way. And then very often she'd listen to it again, how it was, and we'd go back. So it's a lot of that, a lot of like two versions of the song almost.
Right.
That would happen a lot. And in that, you'd get other musicians involved. But songs always got to a stage where they would, let's say, 75% done. And she'd listen and she'd go, what is it saying? And I'd go, well, the lyrics are about that. She said, no, but what is the song saying? I'm not sure it's saying the right thing. And it would just cacophony, like mental explosions would happen in my head. Like, well, what do you want it to say? Because to me, it's saying this and this and this and that. And she would go, oh, great. Okay. So we're on the right path. Or sometimes I'd say something, you go, oh, well, we can't have that. Sometimes when you're working with solo artists, because it's their baby.
Yeah.
And it's precious. It's precious, precious, precious. And they have a great idea of what it is in their head, but they don't tell you, they can't articulate it.
Right.
So you just have to go for it. And Kate Bush was a little bit like that too. There was an absolute direction, and then that direction is met, and then it's maybe like, well, okay, we've got there now, but I don't like it.
Right.
And so now you've got to change it. And so, it's very complicated. So the production side of it becomes very paramount
well,
on
and
solo
especially
records.
when you're forced to try and put it into words, because the talking about music is like dancing about architecture. I mean, it could be that emotionally it is saying exactly what she wants it to say, but if the way you decide to express it that day, as opposed to what you might have said the next day, doesn't quite work, then it's gone.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, it's fun. It can be hard work. It's interesting because going in with a rock band that have like the Idols, so that album that just came out, Ultra Mono, was literally recorded completely in 8 days.
Right.
Because they only had that amount of time in their tour schedule. We went to France. They went to France. Actually, me and Atom went to Bristol, where they're from, had about 4 days rehearsal, and we rearranged, but there were no lyrics.
Right.
It was just riffs, like verse riffs, chorus riffs. And so we kind of arranged them so that it worked better from a musical point of view. We had no idea what the lyrics were. There was maybe 2 or 3 songs that had lyrics, which was extraordinary because Joe is a very focused and very determined and incredibly impatient person. Very like Nick Cave, actually, in the impatience. And I'm not saying impatience is not a bad thing, because it really helps get the momentum happening, and no bullshit can happen. It's just like, that's it, you know. So extraordinarily, we would do a track, and he, for the first time ever, Joe would go out there and do the vocal that he'd just written the lyrics for, just finished. The band had never heard it, so that it was fresh. The band had been rehearsing and rehearsing and rehearsing all these riffs, and, you know, and it's all like, you know, it's just that, right?
Yeah.
And then he comes on and he goes, you know, all right, my friend, you know, and it's just like, wow.
Yeah.
Just amazing. And we were like, and the whole album was like that.
That's incredible.
We did 2 or 3 songs a day, brand new lyrics. No one's ever heard them. Worked.
Wow.
Everything worked. They are a killer band. That band is absolutely amazing to me. Really fun. Very, very high energy stress. They're like a military operation.
Right.
You know, and Joe is like a major in the army. He orders people around like you've never heard before. Yeah, it's funny. They have to put their hand up to talk.
Well, there are a lot of them. You know, I can see that.
Yeah. Well, it's just he'll go like, hang on, you're all talking at the same time. I can't hear fucking anything. So he said, like, put your hand up. And he's like, yeah, Bowen, you got something to say? And Bowen would go, yeah, I think it should be like blah, blah, blah. Okay, good point. What do you think, Lee? Yeah, right. Okay, let's do it. Come on. Out we go. And they go like this, and like amazing. It's just like so fast. But, you know, so all recorded live, all, you know, some overdubs, not many, and vocal done live. Some vocals were redone afterwards, but literally one take.
Right.
Joe just do a take and literally throw the microphone on the floor and leave. Hey, can you do another take? What?
Why?
What? Next song? Yeah, next song. All right. But then, you know, me and Atom took the tapes back to LA, and we both have home studios. Just edit, move, like, you know, not edit fixing,
right?
Just making it better. Yeah, sometimes taking a section that was tight and riffy that worked and doubling it, things like that, and a lot of the production, the sonic production, because that record sounds sonically it's very specific, and you know, it's got a lot of low end, and it's a great. I'm very happy with the way that record turned out. It took a lot of effort. I mean, we mixed that over a period of 3 months. I'm not saying it took 3 months to mix,
right?
But it was a lot of detailing, and so it was recorded 8 days, but probably took about 30 days to mix. You know, it's nuts. I mean, I don't really know many albums that would have done that way, where the mixing was so long.
Right. Well, I mean, but to be fair, a huge percentage of that's technically production, I suppose. But you're mixing while you do it.
No, well, in the case of that album, it is absolutely.
Yeah. But I think, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, to get it sounds very simple. The record is supposed to, it's, you know, ultra mono. It's supposed to sound simple and to the point. There's never 2 melodies at any given time.
Right.
I mean, there really isn't. It's always one idea at a time with a vocal. And the vocal is not that melodic mostly.
No.
So it's a very, you know, and it's a very unusual record from that point of view. But to make those riffs really killer when you hear them, they had to be EQ'd the right way, and to make there's one, which song is it? Which it goes
It's the second track, I think. Yeah.
It's Grounds. So in order to make the boom huge, right? What do? You have to make the small, but we don't want the
Yeah.
to sound small because
Yeah.
it's the main riff. So it's like, okay, really distorted mid-range, pan it, and then the boom. Okay, it just sounds like a boom, right? It's just a bass note, a drum, and a tom, and all the guitars going dunk. No, it's got an 808 sample going boom underneath. There's a lot of clever trickery going on there
Right.
to make it do that, and there's also distorted snare sounds going boom, boom. It's very sonically produced, and all of that happened after the recording.
Right.
And hopefully you don't notice it. You just
Well,
think, wow, they're a
I mean,
killer band, and
yeah,
it's gone off.
in it definitely comes across as a band, but it's like that one extra sort of what the fuck am I hearing? Like it's just it tweaks your ear, and I think that like one of the things I loved about it was how varied the drum sounds are. And when you do a record that fast, if you finish it fast, the drums are going to be the same. There's going to be one
Yeah.
like really cool sound, but those drums are all over the place with where
Yeah.
they end up. And every single time it's like, right, that makes perfect sense with what's going on in the riff. And also, it's really surprising to me about the vocals only because there's so many times in that record where there are repeated words and you'd think like things would be written around that. But he's writing around the riff, but they knew to kind of give him the space, like this is going to be a mantra, this is going to be a story, it's really, really good.
It is extraordinary. I mean, because some of the Gang of Four stuff was written that way, and Public Image. So a lot of the bands that they're influenced by actually did make records the same way that they did. I don't believe that they're aware of that. So. But it's interesting. Now, it's a type of music. It's a type of music. It's basically all about the riff is catchy and usually has an energy and a momentum to it that's extraordinary. And then the vocals are kind of political.
Yeah.
You know, the Gang of Four were you know, it's not political as in about politics, but it's political as in it's the youth demanding something or saying something or actually complaining or pointing out something to the older generation that they're not happy about. And I think that's kind of what punk rock is. And I very much love that type of attitude of in bands. And very different band, but a band I really love is Silverchair, who I worked with when they were 15, 14 even. And their lyrics are quite, Daniel's lyrics are extraordinary. I mean, he's really voicing some stuff there that's grown up, really grown up stuff. I love these kind of writers they're writing very much from within. It's a passion. You know, they're not writing to make pop records. They're writing because they've got something to say.
Right. Which is a common theme with a lot of the artists you've worked with. I mean,
yeah, definitely.
And even though Joe's doing his lyrics at the last second, I mean, obviously he's there in rehearsals while the stuff's getting put together, and he's got input. So I'm sure even if it's not conscious, there's stuff in his head about how he's going to be attacking the song when it comes time. But
there was a great moment I have to share, which I was like, God bless him, where we had this song. I can't remember which song it is now, but the chorus was actually a vocal melody, like a catchy vocal melody, and he's not that kind of singer, but he nailed it really well. And we listened back, and he listened back, and he said, "No, that's shit. We can't have that." And other members of the band were like, "Oh no, it's great. That's great. We need something like that on it." And it literally did sound kind of like a catchy chorus of a dare I say it, U2 record or
Right.
something like that, you know. It was leaning towards that. It wasn't punk. It was like a rock song, like a catchy rock song.
Yeah.
And Joe was like, really didn't like it. And so a lot of discussion, very loud, argumentative discussion about it. So much so that me and Atom had to sort of just stay there quiet because we like, fucking hell, the passion in the room was, you know, strong. And so I said, hang on. What about we get Bowen, who can sing, who's one of the guitarists, to do the melody so we don't lose the melody. And that can be a backing vocal. And Joe, you just talk it. You do your thing, just try and talk it. Same lyric. We'll put the two together. So one will be behind the other. Yeah, all right. So Bowen went in there, did a couple of takes, double tracked it, got it sound good, put a bit of effect on it. And Joe goes in and talks it, you know, in his way. And he comes in, listens to it, and he goes, "Nah, still sounds like shit." He says, "It's complicated. It's too complicated." And I said, "Well, hang on a minute. Hang on. You know, just be a bit patient. Let me just try something. I'll put a little bit more reverb on Bowen and sync it back a bit so it'll be like more in the background, and we'll put you drier because it's confused right now. You can't tell which is the lead." And he comes up to me really close like this, and he says, "Listen, Nick, I know you're a good record producer, right? I know that." He said, "But we don't want any fancy production on this record, like reverb on vocals." I was like, Atom was behind it. He was just like, and yeah, okay.
All right.
I was like, okay. He says, "I'll do it again. I know what to do." He said, "Switch that other vocal off." He went in there and just did this kind of vocal that was sort of in between. It was not perfectly in tune. It had the melody, but the melody was implied more than sang. Bang, done. And it was just like, wow, yeah, it is better.
That's
that is better.
funny. There are a lot of artists where the scariest thing in the world to them is that they've just written a pop song. You know?
Oh yeah. Oh God, I've worked with all of them.
Well, look,
it's true.
We've gone full circle now. So we went idols to idols. We missed a lot of stuff in between. But do you want to just do a few questions from the chat, and then at some later date we'll do a part 2.
Yeah, I mean, Midnight Oil and Silverchair, you know, two amazing bands we need to talk about. But it's a lot. It's a lot of, you can't talk about.
Well, and Yeah Yeahs and Arcade Fire
and Talking Heads.
Yeah.
Okay,
and
so
Refused. We can't, you know,
and
talk
Refused.
about Dennis, you know.
Dennis, where is Dennis? Like, I tell you something about Dennis. So Dennis, I love Dennis. My God.
Yeah.
One of the most amazingly beautiful people. So Dennis is obviously a Nick Cave fan, and we do, you know, I work with him, and he calls me or texts me from, I think, Berlin, where he was, and the Bad Seeds were playing. So he texts me, he says, "Hey, Nick, you know, the Bad Seeds are playing. Is there any way you can get me into their gig? We've just done a gig and I can go to the gig. Can you put me on?" I said, "Yeah, I'm sure I can do it." And he said, "Do you think I'll be able to meet Nick Cave?" And I said, "Look, let me just do it. Let me just, I'll reach out to the tour manager or whatever." And it turned out it worked, you know, like sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. Anyway, so I text back to Dennis. And I said, "Yeah, you're on the list +1, and you'll have a backstage pass. So just go in and just go up to Nick. Don't be shy. He's, you know, he's really funny, and he's not, you know, he's not really like people think. But just go up to him and tell him, you know, tell him you're a friend of mine. He'll be fine. Just go up." He says, all right, I'll do it." So then the story comes back that Dennis goes backstage, and Dennis is kind of tall and thin like me. He wears paisley shirts, right? Like I've got on there. We've just got a similar clothes vibe and all that, and similar hair, I guess, in a way. Anyway, he goes up to Nick and he goes, "Oh, hi Nick. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm a friend of Nick Launay's." And Nick goes, "You look like Nick Launay," and gives him a massive hug. And it's just this great thing. And he was so nice. He was the sweetest guy. He says, "My God, you look like..." And so, you know, they became, they got on really well. It's just like this. It was just a funny moment. Like,
wow. Well, I've got two
like
two quick Dennis stories. If you want two more that are bizarre.
yes.
So I was working on an international noise conspiracy record with him.
Yes,
And
I know. And I love that record, by the way. It's fantastic.
So for some reason, I can't even remember why, but I got 2 tickets to go to a screening of The Two Towers, the movie, when it was first coming out.
Right.
And it was at like 9:30 in the morning at the Cinerama Dome. And so I like, "Dennis, man, you want to go?" And he's like, "Yes." So I picked him up at his hotel and we got there, but we didn't realize people had been lining up for hours for the screening. We thought, well, everyone's got a ticket. Like, it's not going to be that big a deal. So we were the last ones in. We were in the very front row, like this.
Right.
The whole
Yeah.
Watching the movie.
Yeah.
But that was amazing. And then at Coachella, the same year that Grinderman and then Nick played, I'm pretty sure it was the same year, the Hives were playing. So I went to see them because they were playing main stage, and I ran into Dennis and like, "Oh, let's go watch." So obviously Pele knows Dennis, you know, it's a small
world over there. Yeah.
So we're in that little pen kind of near the stage, and Pele's doing his amazing thing where he makes the entire crowd sit down. He makes them sit on the ground so that then they can explode. But it's a great frontman moment. But Dennis doesn't want to sit down. He's like, "I'm not sitting down. I'm fucking Dennis." Like, he wasn't too cool for it, but he's like, "I really don't want to sit down." And Pele just turns to him and says, "Even you, Dennis." And I go, "Okay."
That's great. Even you. Did he sit down?
Oh, yeah. When Pele yells at you directly, when your name called by Pele, you sit down.
Yeah. Well, both of those guys are such good frontmen.
Yeah.
I mean, Dennis's technique with the microphone
Holy
catching
shit.
it. I mean, it's insane. I mean, I know Rod Stewart does it, but I reckon Dennis is maybe the best.
I think he might be.
Of those, yeah. It's extraordinary.
Never misses.
He did it once. I saw at the gig, and the lights were quite low with the tubing, you know, that holds the lights up there. And he did this thing, and it went round it. So it's like his microphone was up there, and he very cleverly just lowered it, you know, and the microphone came down, and he just did the vocal like that.
Lemmy.
And then like Lemmy, and that was a great look. It's like the guy is just
he can do no wrong.
And then I can't remember how he got it down. He somehow tugged it, and it went brrr, and he caught it, and it was like right on cue. And I was like, what?
Some people are born to do that.
Yeah, I mean, he pulls those rock moves.
Yeah.
In a way, if other people did it, they would be cliche and
exactly.
And like,
I mean, especially in front of a band like Refused, you would think like, no, man, you got to be cooler than that. But no, you don't.
No, because he does them so well.
Yeah.
And he looks great doing it. Yeah, I love him, man. He's great. He is great. He's
all right.
A great
well,
guy.
When you come back,
questions.
We'll talk about the record. Yeah. So Mark, come on in. He's on a delay, so it takes him a couple of seconds because he's actually listening to the stream.
Hello.
Oh, there he is.
I am. Hello.
Hello, Mark.
This has been amazing.
Oh, good.
Well, there definitely is a part 2 to come, but
yeah, definitely. There's so many things that we haven't gotten to. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we have a whole bunch of questions in our chat room. Who's loving this? Everybody's talking a ton in there. And how it works is they get to vote each other's questions up. So we'll start with the
Okay.
most upvoted questions and then go
Great.
from there.
Okay. This sounds like fun.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So our first question is from Ivan. And he says, being an English dude that lived in a few spots, LA, Australia, Spain, etc., what's the most different thing you find in your way in recording, or sorry, what's the most different thing you find in your way to recording in all these different places? So maybe what's different about recording in each place?
What's different? It's funny, but I like going to different countries. Obviously, I love traveling, and very often with bands, we choose to go somewhere unusual and different to have an experience together and to not have the distraction of people they know, even though they love their friends. The idea of going somewhere, and that's happened obviously. That's happened almost every time with the Bad Seeds, and that we've always gone to remote places. And it's incredible how you get a vibe. For instance, I've been doing a lot of studios recently in France because they actually have some really great studios and really great desks. A lot of the analog desks, API ones, but mostly Neve ones, these old vintage desks that were built in the 60s. The French, whether it was deliberate or not, I don't know, but somehow they held on to those desks and didn't sell them and trade them in for SSLs, whereas England did. I mean,
Traded
even though
them all
Neve is
in,
an
yeah.
English desk, yeah, it's very hard to find a vintage Neve in England. There's only a few, but they all swapped to SSL. And whereas France, there's just, I mean, I keep hearing of another one and another one. And so Push the Sky Away by Bad Seeds was done at Fabrique, which is down in Saint-Rémy near Marseille. And that album, honestly, would not be that album if we had done it anywhere else. It had a vibe there. And, you know, the food, having a break, a big lunch break in the middle of the day meant that we started earlier to have that. And you know, so the French way of being influenced that record. Actually, you know, Skeleton Tree was done at La Frette, another French studio, and Abattoir Blues was done at Faber, which was in Paris. And being in Paris and in this beautiful old recording studio where Serge Gainsbourg did a lot of his records, it had this feeling, this big, you know, feeling about it, because the studio was, I think it's more the studio and the way the studio feels that affects the record rather than the country sometimes. I mean, I love, you know, I liked old vintage studios, but definitely going to another country has always been a plus, always, because everybody, it's like you become a gang of people that have traveled together somewhere, and your purpose is very clear that you're there to make this record. Whereas if you do it in the country or city where the band live, they're always arriving late, or friends are distracting them and all that. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
well, I think we've also learned that all French studios start with F.
That's true. They do.
Except for Black Box and Guiltel, and yeah, except for all the ones that don't. But yeah, a lot of them.
Except all the ones that don't.
Yeah, and I'm really sorry you never made it down to Mono Valley, because of course now that's gone and dusted. But an old Neve that was brought back to live here, but now it's gone again, unfortunately. So, yeah, well, you know.
Yeah, well, it'll reappear. They always do.
Yes.
They always do reappear. Cool.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So our next question is from Sam Sergi. And Sam asks, Hey Nick, how did you and Warren get that insanely huge guitar sound on the Grinderman records? Still blows me away every time.
Probably referring to the No Pussy Blues one, which is crazy. That the song is sort of like just teetering along mostly, and then it goes, I've got the No Pussy Blues, and this guitar comes in and goes right. I'm sure that's what you're talking about. Although, and that sound does appear a few times on a few songs. What it is it's one of his, Mandocasters, little mandolin type. They're like little tiny Stratocasters, and they've only got 4 strings, and they're very loud. And in fact, you can buy. He's actually made them, so you can buy them. I think it's oh God, what's the name? Eastwood. I think it's Eastwood Guitars. If you go online, put Eastwood, you can find them. But they're very loud.
Yeah,
they have very loud pickups. And so start with that. But on No Pussy Blues, it's actually a wah-wah pedal set to a frequency. Like you go,
Yeah.
so you get it like, so it's going.
Otherwise known as a cock-wah, because you cock the wah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not as dirty as it sounds.
No, but appropriate for that song. And and so it's that. Obviously, it's him and he, Warren and his attitude and how he plays. That's why it sounds like that. But the reason that guitar comes in and it just sounds insanely loud is, now this might surprise you out there, because it is insanely loud. Just to give you an idea of how loud it is compared to the rest of the mix. When anybody's mixed a record, you have your faders, and it's you get your levels, and you want this thing to be loud, so you leave a little bit of headroom so the fader can go up further, because the faders are moving to the level. So it already sounds loud, and the fader's really far up. And then it was Warren was like, can we make it any louder? And I'm like, you're joking, it's so loud. And he goes, oh yeah, but it could be louder, like on raw power. And I was like, well, yeah, okay, and then we listened to raw power, and it's mind-blowing, because the drums kind of disappear on some of the songs, because the guitars or the vocal, it's just so, in a way, technically badly mixed. It's just a mess. It's chaos, but it's mixed for a reason that way. There was a reason they did that. It's not just badly mixed. It's wildly mixed. And so I was like, the fader won't go up any further. Well, can't you turn it up more at the top? Haven't you got more at the top? No, it's full. and it's like, I says, have you got a hacksaw? He said, well, just cut. If we cut through the desk and cut into the desk so the fader can go up. And so I was like, oh my God, they're really not backing. I'm like, okay. So I was like, you put it through 2 channels and have 2 channels going at once. So it's double, and they're both maxed out. So we already had the mix, and the mix was sounding good. It was just this one guitar he wanted louder. So that's what it is. It's excruciatingly loud. Like, I know that sounds very simple, but it really is. Yeah. Like, if you've got the mix and you push the guitar as loud as you dare, and then double the volume, that's how loud it is. So when it comes in, if the tape is already hitting the needles like that, it just goes like that.
Right.
When we mastered that record, the mastering engineer was like, I'm going to have to bring the volume down on the whole album to make that louder, if you want it that loud. And I said, well, what happens if you don't? Because if we do that, they won't like it. They'll want it all loud. It's supposed to be a loud record. So it literally is going into,
Just clipping.
I don't know what it's called. It's clipping digitally. So it's maxed out on every possible thing. The mix is maxed out. The tape machine, I think it was mixed analog, is maxed out. It's maxing out the tape machine that was played back off. Digitally, it's just very, 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 very loud. Nothing is louder than that.
No, you
and
need.
Then,
oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Well, then on top of that, when it came to the mastering, they kept receiving the mastering, and Warren was like, "The mastering is pretty good, but when I put it into iTunes, if I push up the iTunes little equalizer at 3, it says 3. If I push it up at 3 on both channels, it's better. Can the mastering engineer do that?" I was like, because I know I've worked with them a lot. The answer no is not the correct answer. Yes is correct. So I ring up the mastering engineer, say, "Listen, I know. Just, can you do it just pushing 3K up on the whole album?" He's like, "It's going to sound like shit." I said, just try it. And I said, "Look, go and listen to Raw Power." And of course, you listen to Raw Power and it's like, oh my God. It's insanity, that record. It's so mid-range. That's what it is. So did it. So Warren gets it again, plays it back, and pushes 3K up again.
Oh no.
And kind of rings back and goes, "Oh, it sounds better, but if you push 3K up again more, and actually 5K, it sounds even better. Can you do that?" It was mastered so many times. And the mastering engineer got to a point and said, "I don't want my name on this record. It's disgusting. I'm not proud of it. I don't agree with this. It's just too much mid-range. It's too..." Anyway, it went back again, and they both, Nick and Warren, loved it. Now, bear in mind that Nick and Warren can't hear anything above 5K because they're deaf from that. A lot of musicians are. So they're hearing it slightly different to us anyway, but it sounds amazing. That record sounds so good. And that mastering engineer has got more work where people have come in and said, "Can you make it sound like the Grindamane record?" The poor bloke, he's actually told me, he said, "I guess I'm glad that my name stayed on it because I've got more work out of that record than any other." And it's just like, you can't do it to all music, all records, but that record, it just suits that frequency being pushed. It's nuts. So...
Wow.
So that's amazing. The answer to that guitar sound.
Well,
all the guitar, it's just...
What a story.
And I was just going to say that you had to listen to it from a bunker on the next planet, right?
Yeah. It's
nice.
Nuts, that record. Another question?
Although people are saying that Andrew won the loudness war. So they're contesting that in the chat room.
That's a different story.
Okay. So our next question is from Mark Gittins. And Mark says, "First, congratulations on the new Idols record. It sounds incredible."
Thank you.
And went to number 1.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And he says, "My question is around the recording of the drums for the record. It sounds punchy and aggressive, yet tight. And I'd love to know more about this process."
Well, it was recorded, the whole album, as I said before, was recorded very quickly. I'm going to say the key to why their drums sound so good on that record, and I think they sound good, is the drummer. That drummer is amazing. It doesn't matter if it sounds good or he just plays. He's one of those drummers who plays so accurately, but yet with feel. That is a huge part of why the drums on that record sound so good. He is that good. He's like a lot of those big session drummers who play on lots of like 9-inch. Andrew, you'd know, like those top American drummers that
Josh Freese.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Dave's like, he's like that. He's that good. He will be recognized as one of the best drummers of all time. I'm not kidding.
Wow.
And that's why that record could be made in 8 days, is because he's that good. But it was recorded in a quite small stone room, not unlike the Townhouse, where it was sort of the roof is like a wine cellar, but a big wine cellar, and so it's very brash and loud and trashy sounding, but we did a lot of EQing on the kick and snare, and there were some sub sounds added to the kick on some songs that made it extra, and the note was quite well tuned. I mean, a lot of time was spent getting those sounds just right. So it's a combination of a trashy room mics that make it sound exciting and punk rock and live and sort of Iggy Pop like, let's say, with also very good solid close mics, and the microphones we use, it varied from song to song, but we used, I mean, I always use Bayer 88s on the kick drum and EQ them. I think on this one we actually used these mics. I should know what they're called. They're a new brand. Oh my God, called a Stealth. Do you know what that mic is?
No.
It's got a star. It's like an Aster or something. I should know. Know this.
Aston, maybe.
Aston, maybe. Yeah. If you type in
let's
Aston
say
Stealth.
Aston. It's the Aston Stealth.
Aston Stealth.
Oh, okay.
That's
so
it.
We're gonna use facts instead. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's very deliberate that the drums sound the way they do. A lot of time was spent mixing it to get it like that. And it was a combination of me going for trashy punk rock sounds and Atom going for very precise front end stuff, and a killer drummer.
Nice.
A lot of credit to him.
Cannot overstate the importance.
Yes.
No, it's, people think it's all good engineering and mixing. If you got a good players, it's
Yeah.
I once said I recorded Eric Clapton, and there was an Eric Clapton album called Behind the Sun, and I was the engineer on it, and I could not believe how good Eric Clapton's amp sounded. He kept playing and I was like, oh my God, that amp sounds so good. And I kept saying to it, it's a great amp. And he was like, is it? Very lovely guy. He said, oh yeah, I use a few different amps for this one. So I'm glad you like it. And, at the end of the record, he blew a speaker on it. And he's like, the roadie guy, his main guitar tech, said, "Yeah, what do you want to do with this amp? Because the speaker's broke. Should we send it to America? Should we keep it in England?" He says, "Oh, Nick really likes that amp. We'll give it to him." And of course, the guitar tech is like, "What? This is like a vintage Fender Tweed, probably number 009. It's an incredibly special amp." But Eric has a few of them. And so I said, "Do you want it, Nick?" And I said, "Oh, I'd love it." Yeah. Oh, thank you. And he said, "All right." And I said, "Oh, you better sign it." So Eric says EC was here, which was another record of his. So I've got this amp. Of course, about a year later, I was like, the amp does sound good. I was like, oh, yeah, maybe it had something to do with Eric playing it. It's like, it's the way, it's not only his stuff, which you know, is great. But it's when he's playing rhythm guitar, it sounds extraordinary because he's hitting it just right and he's holding it right, and it's not, and he's, you know, so much of the sound is to do with the player. It doesn't matter whether it's a bass guitar. I mean, you can play a bass guitar and hand it to another bass guitar player and it will sound so different.
Yeah.
This is just how the plectrum hits it. So it's all that stuff. And it's with drummers even more so sometimes. They, you know, they play the snare that way, you know. I mean, Stuart Copeland, when he's playing, it doesn't matter which record you listen to, there's a sound.
Yeah.
Well, it's him. It's because of he's doing that thing that he does. Yeah. So kudos to the musos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Amazing.
So you got
Cool.
one more? What do you think?
Sound good, Nick?
Yeah, hit me.
All right.
All right. Cool. Okay, so let's see. So Will DeMilo asks, how do you split the duties collaborating with another producer?
It's very interesting, that one, because like I said, that I hadn't really done it before. But with Atom, we just have this thing where we complement each other. So that was very easy. And there's just, I guess the answer to that was you have to back off a bit and give space to the other record producer and listen to their ideas and make your ideas work. And you also have to not confuse the artist, because if me and Atom were bickering or disagreeing, it's very confusing for the artist. So we did have differences of opinion, but they weren't like, it was passion driven. It was more like, oh, I really want that part to sound like that. So we would discuss it more in sort of between us and then take it that way. But I did also do the other collaboration I did do, which happened twice, was with the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, where they got Dave Sitek was involved, right? So Dave Sitek produced the first Yeah Yeahs record. Now, interestingly, Dave Sitek is more of a musician originally, and he I think someone else was going to produce that first record, and Dave Sitek worked in a Blockbuster type video shop with Karen. They both worked together in this video rental shop. That's how they know. And Dave Sitek was their roadie. When they started out at the very beginning, he was their roadie.
Wow.
But he really had a vision of sound for them, and they were their best friends. And I think they tried a producer, and I don't know who that was. And then Dave Sitek, you know, stepped in or something happened, and he produced that first record. So he's an amazing guy. He is very loud person. He's very opinionated. He's quite bossy. But his passion and enthusiasm is extraordinary and very contagious, and you can't help, you know, go with him and his idea, because it's like you can't do anything else. He's bigger than life, and he's a musician type. I, on the other hand, are very much sort of have this sort of respect and interest in the musician's opinion, so much so that I'll listen to everybody and try everything, and I'll get there by doing. That's my approach, is to sort of almost be the person who captures their ideas and their playing. And it's quite a different approach to Dave Sitek's. So that was a very interesting thing, but it worked because we didn't actually work together. We were never in the same studio together. What we did is I did all the backing tracks. I basically did all of the Yeah Yeah Yeahs recording. So I recorded all the vocals and comped all the vocals and did all the vocals with Karen. The backing tracks were all played with everybody playing together, which is two people, you know, and then he did overdubs more like keyboards because he's a keyboard player. Oh, he's a guitar player too. And he would do some of the overdubs and programming, which I don't do. I mean, I would get in a programmer to program keyboards because that's not my thing. So I'm more of a guide the talent in the right direction and listen to what they want to do and make that happen and capture their eccentricities and all that. Dave Sitek is a musician who joins in with the band, but he's got a very opinionated, he's a very opinionated person and has a very strong direction. So it's almost like we work in such different ways that we bring totally different things to the plate, to the, you know, and so that worked really well. And it actually, with both It's Blitz, how It's Blitz was done is I recorded it and produced it all up to a point. Then we had a break. They went back to New York. While they're in New York, they got Dave Sitek to overdub some sounds and keyboards on it. And then he wrote parts with them because he was used to doing that from before. And then they finished all that and they sent it back to me. And then I edited it, moved things around and mixed it up to a point. And so it went back and forth. And then come the follow album, which was Mosquito. The band actually started with yet another record producer who I won't mention actually, but a great record producer who's from another band, and it didn't work out for some reason. I don't know why. And I got this very, very panicky call from Karen asking if I could produce the record. And I kind of worked out, we had to delay things. And anyway, I went in and did it. And then it was like, they had this time to think about it. And they said, would I mind if Dave Sitek joined us as well? And I thought that'd be great. So instead, because I'd never met Dave Sitek, right? On the first album, he did his bit, I did mine, and we blended it together. Mosquito, we went out to Sonic Ranch Studios out in El Paso, where they have a few studios. So Dave Sitek had one studio and I had the other one. And I got there a week before he did. So we got about 3 backing tracks done in the first week. Dave Sitek arrives. And so I would be doing vocals with Karen in one studio, and then he would have the other song, and he'd be doing guitar overdubs with Nick and doing keyboard stuff. And it was like this factory. So the tapes, so to speak, well, hard drives went back and forth. And this worked out great. It was amazing. It was perfect. And and we got to hang out for dinner and we got to do this. But we kind of didn't, it's interesting because we didn't really talk. Me and Dave didn't talk about, he's such a, I don't know if any of you know him, but he is such a character. He's a huge guy, really tough looking. And he's got these massive glasses and he just takes over all conversation and everything. And you can't really discuss things with him. So it would just be like, me and the band would do our thing and send it over to him and he'd go bang, 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 bang. And send back this thing. And sometimes it was way too much. He'd completely taken over the song. Like it wasn't yeah, yes anymore. And so we used bits of it. So he was like another musician. Right. That's how that works. So very different experiences working with him and then working with Atom. Atom and me are more like one thing. We work together in the same room and we're doing it like that. So yeah. Yeah, very different.
Awesome.
Well, and then to finish this off, I just want to mention at Sonic Ranch, the breakfast burritos they would leave you on the weekends. I miss those so much right now. Oh my God.
They're big.
Oh God, they're amazing. Absolutely amazing. All right, that's enough about
and of course, and Tony Rancich,
Amazing.
the owner. Oh, I'd put him up there with Dennis as one of the most extraordinary people on planet Earth. It's just like,
Yeah,
what a great guy. Can I tell one story
of course. It's your
to end
show.
on? We'll end on this. It has nothing to do with me. Al Jurgensen. I mentioned his name. Was there, and he'd done so much drugs, every drug imaginable, and he didn't come out of his room, and Tony was very worried about him. Eventually he comes out and he's sitting there, very still, and Tony sits down. It's like a hacienda. You imagine you're in Mexico, and he sits down next to Al and goes, and Tony's a beautiful, quite older guy. He looks a bit like Dave Carradine from Kung Fu, or Kill Bill. So
Yes.
Kill Bill to younger people. So imagine Kill Bill. He sits down and, Al, you okay? And Al goes, yeah, I'm all right. And they start talking, and while they're talking, a mosquito. Now, Al had been literally injecting whiskey into his veins and stuff, right? So, along with every other drug you can imagine, and they're talking, and this mosquito, huge mosquito, they're like crazy big mosquitoes out there, lands on Al's arm, and Tony sees it and he's like, should I mention it? It says they're talking away, and he says, Al, there's a mosquito on your arm. And he's like, this mosquito's digging his long piercing thing into, and Al goes, watch this, and the mosquito just goes, dies.
Wow.
So that's my Al Jurgensen story.
Well, I think you should write
connected
a song.
with it's the song, the album Mosquito. It wasn't really connected, but it kind of was.
It kind of was.
Because he told us that. Yeah. Also, another thing about Tony Rancich is Karen O rang him up, right, and says, hey, Tony, will you marry me? And Tony goes, what? You want me to marry you? And she goes, oh, no, sorry. I mean, will you become a minister and marry me to my boyfriend? And he becomes a minister. She flies out there with her boyfriend, Barnaby. They go out to the desert with a mariachi band, and Tony marries them. That's how they got married.
Amazing.
That's how cool Tony is. Yeah.
Tony is badass. And I think there's a lot of stuff that we will never know about Tony. And he wants to keep it that way. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
With him and Steve Lillywhite should get together.
I think it's a different set of stuff. But yeah, they both have their sets. I don't think that Venn diagram is just two circles, though. There's no overlap. I don't think.
No. Very true.
Excellent.
Very true.
Well, Nick, this has been incredible. Really amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time. Please thank your family for giving us the time as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to announce that next week is Joe Ciccarelli, which should be quite interesting.
Love Joe.
Joe is amazing.
Say hi to Joe.
I will. I absolutely will. And now I'm going to mute our microphones and go to the thanks for watching screen. So thanks for watching, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Nice to meet you all out there. Be safe. Be cool.